quote me on this. This is just a personal intent. I think tomorrow. And let me explain why, because it's half term. Government breaks up for 2 weeks tomorrow, and if they release it tomorrow, then the chances of anyone getting any answers for a couple of weeks are going to be limited. And as well as that, those observant amongst you would have noticed that there have been a number of announcements, one way or another, that have come out quietly over the past few days, which all link to the Send white paper. And well, let me put it this way: for the amount of work it will generate for everyone in this, a lot of people in this room, I hope it's not tomorrow. But who knows? Okay, so the reason we're here is because we have 2 items to cover today. The first of all is the main item. The 2 main items to cover today are the feedback from the auditor's request IR 1 to look at the JTI and the audit response there, which is going to be, I think, the body of today's meeting. The second bit is to look at the deficit management plan governance structure in relation to the member oversight. Those of you in the room that are old enough and wise enough to remember a few months ago when it first came to us, the DMP, one of the things that this committee said and identified was the fact that we feel it's too big an item for just this committee to look at, as well as our normal work, which is why we made a recommendation back to the executive that there needs to be a specific member oversight body that's supported and able to do the necessary dives and bringing all things together. We'll cover that when we get to it. So that's where we are for today. But that's some of the reason why I'm explaining, because obviously those of you with calendars will notice in a couple of weeks' time, we've got another meeting planned. So this is to fit the gap. And the reason it's today is because the closing date for the audit report's conclusion is the 28th of February. So we need to have had this meeting and fed back in before then. Okay, that's me for now. So moving on. So we'll start with the bits I need to cover. So I'm assuming that there's no one waving at me online, so I'm assuming you can hear there. Agenda packs have been published online and available either from the council's website or via ModGov. When I invite anybody to speak, if you could clearly state your name, who you are, for the benefit of anybody listening online, and also to help us identify you in the recording. We are recording this meeting for our purposes of minutes, etc. And one that we always forget, because the agendas are published electronically, please try to make reference to the page on the online system that you're talking to, because that helps members and officers understand what points you're trying to make. In respect to housekeeping, there are no fire alarms planned, so if the alarm does sound, follow democratic services and congregate outside. Okay, agenda item 1 of our agenda is apologies for absence. Jack.
Good afternoon all, and thank you, Chair. We received apologies from Councillors Pollingham. We have Councillor Henry Hobhouse as her substitute, and also from Councillor Simon Carswell.
Thank you. Are there any other apologies that I need to be made aware of? No, thank you for that. Okay, so the agenda item 2 are minutes from our last meeting held on the 8th of December, I believe. It's to agree whether there's a true record. Members, are we happy with it? Councillor Shearer.
Thank you. I think I was there, but I don't think I'm on the list. I think I'm only present rather than a member of the team, but I think I was in the room.
Okay, that's fine. Noted. Any other points or relevance? As someone happy to recommend that we accept them as a true record. Thank you, Councillor Lovell. Seconded. Anyone against that? Thank you. Noted. That's that done. Item 3 is declarations of interest for those of you that are in the room as members. Are there any declarations that aren't already made in your online bit? It doesn't, just one for me. It's not on what I've not managed to update it yet, but I've been made a trustee of the National Youth Agency. And I take that role up in the next couple of weeks. It shouldn't be relevant today, but just in case, I thought I'd get it out and cover it. Okay, agenda item number 4. Public questions. I'm pleased to say we have a couple of questions today. So I'd like to welcome both Sarah and Daisy May. Thank you for taking the time to come along with us. We're a little bit, as I say, nicer than the executive, because the poor executive make you stand up on a rostrum over there. But you could, in this room, you can sit down, and that's fine, and you can just get the question. So I believe that we've agreed the questions and with a possible answer from Heather. Just a bit of background, Sarah, just so to explain. Obviously, the way that the council is structured when it comes to public questions, I'm a little bit, I feel a little bit, or my committee feel a little bit, not harder done by, but poor in the fact that we can't actually respond formally to the questions from members of the public directly unless it's related to items on our agenda. But I just wanted to thank you both for taking the time to write the questions. And I know that both the DCS officers and our executive member are pleased to respond. So if you'd like to ask your questions, Sarah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair, and I hope they help with formulating future work. Daisy was going to help me read, but she might come back in. So question one, why have the regional directors of for the Department of Education South West Advisory Board, previously known as the regional directors, not asked for the mega mat mergers that are currently being added to their meeting on the 26th of February? Why has that not been added to the scrutiny agenda? With £260,000 CEO payout, curriculum levels at BCA far from reaching national expectations, and rated requires improvement in 2023 with no recent Ofsted reviews. They would like to take on Haygrove Secondary School, whose MAT have a CEO and team at a cost of £500,000 plus £400,000 on core services. Neither demonstrate an internal inclusion and or advisory team, something that would be expected to see in multi-academy trusts. This is only one of the mergers on the list. Too much money is being wasted, leaving children with poor education and a future bill to cover the 12 to 14 year education deficit, DMP, in their future taxes as a double blow. Please can we ask Scrutiny to make the relevant scrutiny to guarantee these children's education will remain secure, and I emphasise remain secure, before the Regional Director for Education approves these mega mats of Somerset schools. Question two. There are approximately 3,000 home ed children in Somerset. I estimate at least 2,500 are forced to deregister, and this continues to grow rapidly daily, especially from some of the schools in the above merger lists. Then, the Children Wellbeing and the Wellbeing and Schools Bill amendments by Baroness Barron would indicate a lot of council money would need to be delivered for their parts of the regulations that were voted through in the last hearing. They demand seeing 17 hours of elected home education. Some providers are considering closing their resources due to the amendments. Yet lawmakers have refused to list any support or services in the bill. The council doesn't offer any services, libraries, leisure services and children's centres, community buildings have been axed or are struggling since the major cuts several years ago, from 2018. Keir Starmer says we need tougher regulation of homeschool because schools are so important for integration. And so we need a higher bar for people who want to opt out of the responsibility. Yet schools and colleges are refusing to take in those who need a learning environment and take in and push out, who need a learning environment with resources and baseline expected staff to deliver a hands-on curriculum. We now have SEND tribunals and LAs saying that children do not need EHCPs because their provisions and interventions are being met through, not all elected, home education, and that is nationally, not not just in any particular area. But what actions will the councillors and officers in this committee take moving forward? Ouch, sorry.
No, that's perfect. I was just about to say, if you could start rounding up, but you finished with about 5 seconds spare. So thank you for that. And thank you for your questions. I know that Councillor has agreed to respond, but just for clarity, for the members, if I could, very quickly. First of all, I apologise for you all not having full sight of the questions. That'll be rectified, and we'll make sure that that's done. And I apologise for that. Just to add a bit of context to them, and I hope I'm not putting words in your mouth, so I apologise if I am. But to help my members understand the relevance of your question, you talked about a mega merger. I believe that you making reference to the fact that in and around the Bridgewater area, there are one of the two of the multi-academy trusts are coming together with a number of the schools to create a large cluster, I'll say. So that was the bit that. Thank you for you asking the question. It was on my horizon, and I was made aware of it. So, and it's something that the committee would potentially look at. And secondly, in relation to elective home education, again, that's a topic, one of my favourite topics. So, it's something that this committee already has on its work programme to look at again. So, we'll bring that through. But members, I hope that's good to give you a little bit of context to allow Councillor Shearer to respond.
Thanks so much, Sarah and Daisy. May I really appreciate those. I just got, we obviously write to you with formal, answers to your questions, but just to say in response, if I could. So for question one, thank you for the question and for taking an interest in academic trusts, or academy trusts, I should say, in Somerset. As you'll be aware, trusts sit outside of the responsibilities or oversight of the local authority, and the council has no formal interaction with decisions taken by the Department for Education Advisory Board. We do engage regularly with the DfE South West Regions team, and we have a collaborative relationship, including escalating concerns about school underperformance. In relation to scrutiny, I should say, in relation to scrutiny, members lead the Education Standards Standing Panel, and have invited the MAT CEOs to attend to answer questions. We are aware of the merger that you just mentioned with Bridgewater and Taunton College Trust and Quantock Education Trust. The details of this change is a matter for the DfE and the trust concerned, but we are encouraged by the potential for the strengths in these schools to be shared in areas where support is needed. The evidence to date is that larger trusts are better able to manage school improvement, and therefore mergers are generally a positive potential route to improvement. And then for number two, if you don't mind, go on to number two. Somerset, as you've acknowledged, has a high level of elective home education, and we are aware that there are parents who do not feel the decision to withdraw their child was genuinely elective. We have an extensive programme of capital works and provision development to create new specialist places, because we know that lack of the right provision can be a reason children are withdrawn from school. Our inclusive curriculum and development team is working intensively with school-based staff on training and the knowledge to support children in mainstream schools who are now presenting with higher levels of need than in the past. This is an important area, and one that we'll be giving ongoing focus to in the coming months and years. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that response. We'll make sure you get that in writing. And I've just realised I need to do another declaration. Well, I'm currently in the process of applying to be a governor at Hamp Academy, which is a member of the Bridgewater College Trust. It's not just, I'm sorry, it's just changing. I get it out, otherwise it will come back and bite me otherwise. So thank you for that. Thank you, Councillor Shearer, and thank you, Sarah and Daisy May, for your questions. Okay, moving on then. Agenda item 5 is our outcome tracker. It's attached as a separate document to that. Has anyone any points or issues in relation to it? We're reaching a point where it's starting to become a little bit more usable. So thank officers for their efforts in that. But members, any points or comments? Okay, thank you. Moving on then. So agenda item 6. Let me just find it there. So just for clarification, members, I did mention at the beginning of the meeting that the reason this is coming to us is obviously because of the fact that Grant Thornton, our auditor, has made reference to it and asked us to look at it. been giving a great deal of thought as to why the auditor would choose us as a place to come. But I think it's more a matter of our experience to be able to look at the broader issues in relation to it and try and identify bits. So as I would say, I'll ask Councillor Shearer to introduce it in a moment. But members, please, as always, if you think of a question as you go through, to make it easier, if you put your hand up, I'll note you and then come back to you when we can ask the question. I do have a few questions myself on it, but obviously the report has been circulated along with the main document. I think the report has been structured really well, so thank you, Jane, for putting it in, or thank you for whichever officer kindly put it into the order, because it does help, I think, ask the questions, what's been done and where we are in a lot clearer way, and hopefully it will help members to do it. So Councillor Shearer, thank you.
Thank you. I'll make a start. You'll probably hear from all of us because it's a joint effort and a team effort, which is quite nice. Yes, you remember, I'm sure I don't need to say this, but I will just get us back and kind of tune us in. The joint targeted area inspection, the JTI, was something that we went through 2 years ago. There are different inspections to, say, Ofsted inspections or the social care ILACs, they're called, inspections, because this was not one that was going to be graded. Like some other inspections, it is looking at the wider partnership work. So it wasn't simply our, it was on serious youth violence. So it wasn't simply looking at Somerset Council's response to serious youth violence, both reactively but also strategically. It was looking at how we as a partnership, a system essentially in Somerset, dealt with that. So that included, there were 4 areas, 4 inspection teams, because we had an inspector from, or inspectors from the probation, HMI probation, HMI constabulary, fire and rescue services, from the CQC, the Quality Care Commission, and also from Ofsted. So it was taking health, education, the whole gamut. And it was, we were the 6th in that year that were part of this thematic review. And so, yes, stuff was actually published about us, but very, very anonymized in terms of a public report and no grading. But we did get a very clear steer at the end of the inspection of the things that they felt that we needed to be doing next. Because it was a partnership, so it was a system inspection. Of course, it would have been hard enough doing all the inspection improvement things when it's just one organisation, but when it was at least 4, 5, a lot of people involved in it. Therefore, it was a lot for us to get right, and governance was a big part. From summarising horribly, but the 2 things were, in summary, and Claire will say a lot more, and so will Jane, that, if you like, the 2 things that came away were, we're awfully good in a crisis. We pick up our children very well, and we work together very well if a child is in crisis with regard to serious youth violence, either as the recipient of, or affected by, or just somehow included in serious youth violence. Very good at it. The preventative stuff and working together to actually identify an early intervention was something we were less good at. And the other one was, we had a bit of a muddy governance system. Our kind of organisation chart of how there's lots of boards who talk to each other, and things get fed up to different things and back down, and all the same people on all the same boards. It was, I'm paraphrasing horribly, but our governance wasn't slick, and that was something that we were charged with getting right. So again, these are all things that all 4, 5, I'm saying 5 because there's the NHS Trust and the ICB, there's 2 bits of health and everybody else. And our voluntary sector as well, of course. So there was a lot of people to help us with that, but of course it's taken us a while to get through. So I think that's probably all I need to say about it, except that, of course, a whole action plan was devised, which is what you want to hear about and what we're going to update you on, so that we can actually make changes for our children across our entire county. I'll hand over to Claire.
Before you hand over, Claire, I just noticed we were joined by a couple of esteemed guests online. I'm assuming you'll introduce those for us.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay. So thank you very much. So this is a cast of thousands in terms of people who are here today to be able to answer questions and to give an input. Yeah. So online you've got Lisa Simpson from the police and Sarah Ash from the ICB, because both the Joint Targeted Area Inspection and the Youth Justice Inspection are partnership inspections, as Councillor Shearer has already said. So they are looking at the place, if you like, of Somerset and how everybody interacts and supports young people at risk of serious youth violence or on the edge of criminality across Somerset, rather than an entire focus on the local authority.
So in this report, we have set out the recommendations from both those inspections. They are quite lengthy, so this report is a little dry. I'm very sorry. But I think the key aspect is under point 2, which is on page 24, which is about what was wrong. So setting out there that there are clear themes across those 2 inspection documents and the plans that we put in place, which are critically about requirements to improve partnerships. So particularly in relation to information sharing between organisations, that's sharing information about children to make sure that we've identified the key risks, those children, and who's doing what. Making sure that we can identify our priorities in terms of what are the strategic priorities for the partnership and trying to get ahead of the serious youth violence issues in Somerset, and also how we measure progress on the plans that we've made so that we can identify where we actually have made progress, particularly in relation to early intervention. So the second area of that is early intervention and early identification. So that's about trying to identify those young people much earlier, as Councillor Shearer said. In the youth justice inspection, which was graded, the JTI one wasn't, we got outstanding for our court work because we do really well when we're in a really good situation. But when we were looking at earlier intervention and the preventative staff, some of that was seen as inadequate. So our overall judgment came out it requires improvement. So we've got a lot of work to do, basically. So what we thought we would do today, if people are happy with it, we've put together a presentation which effectively gives you a bit of a deep dive into 2 specific areas that we have made a lot of progress on, or that we've done a lot of work on. One, which evidence partnerships, in terms of the work that we've done in relation to partnerships, which is included in the reports and the progress plans that you've got, but we just thought we'd try and bring it alive a bit by presenting it in that way. And the other one, which gives you a deeper dive into early identification and early help and the work we've done on that in terms of progress. So what I intend to do is hand over to Sam Fahy and Sarah Perry, who work in our prevention service and our youth justice service and lead those services, to lead the presentation. Other people will join in as they feel is useful and helpful. And then it obviously gives members an opportunity to ask questions about things that hopefully feel a bit more live from the presentation. Is that okay? Everybody happy with that? Okay. So do you want to share on this into the meeting, or?
I don't have a link to join the screen.
Have you got this? You've got mine, haven't you? So Jack will share the slide, Sarah, and then you can talk to them. I can hear her. Move out the way.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Claire. So yeah, just to pick up on I'm going to just present some slides really to show you the work that we've been doing across both the partnerships and that early identification element of both the inspections that Claire has highlighted today. So picking up on the partnerships, next slide please, Jack. We did a significant deep dive into all the partnership work across our sector, and Lisa and Sarah, who are on the screen and joined us today, played a key part in that. And what we did was have a significant look across all of the places that children were discussed, or boards or groups were meeting to think about these specific areas of exploitation and serious youth violence. And what we uncovered in that deep dive, and it feels like it was quite a significant piece of work, was that despite people talking about this at various boards or meetings, as Heather pointed out earlier, what we weren't seeing was some real clear strategic action and joined up approach to some of that work. So in response to that, we, next slide please, we have worked across the partnership to think about our approach to exploitation and serious youth violence, but then thinking about and recognising that it isn't just about children in this place. We're talking about vulnerable adults, perpetrators, places, spaces and communities, and how we could develop an all-age approach to individuals, groups, places and spaces across the partnership. and most importantly, how then that manifests to support for our most vulnerable children and families, recognising that we need to intervene as early as possible and ensure those children get the support at the right time by the right service. Coordination of those teams and how they discuss, share information, share intelligence is absolutely crucial. So again, we were looking at when we have all those panels or meetings that discuss individual children, are we having multiple meetings where again we're not seeing the significant action that is going to produce the outcomes and impact that we require to reduce that harm and to reduce and decrease need across those children's and families' lives, working together consistently and robustly to ensure that all of the children are safe within that. And to demonstrate that, next slide please, Jack. Sarah's,
it's still
oh, it's gone, it's still that one.
yeah.
I'm behind. Sarah's going to bring some of that to life with a case study to demonstrate that work over the last 12 months.
So yeah, so one of the children that we've done some quite
For fear of having people online shout at me, you need pick it up, and if you want to, happy for you to face it, to pick it up and put it on your lap if you want to, but otherwise members online won't be able to hear.
No worries. So what you can see on the screen is an overview of the amount of collaboration it took to respond to the needs of a child experiencing significant harm. So this child had been vulnerable and experiencing sexual exploitation in her local community, perpetrated by adults that she was finding it really difficult to identify, and in spaces and places that we didn't know enough about and maybe find out enough about in the previous sort of 12 months that we'd been working with her and building a relationship with her. But in the past 12 months, we've done some really intensive dynamic collaboration coming out of our share panel, which I'll talk to you a little bit more about shortly, where you can see all of the different services that wrapped around. So for this child, the police, particularly the dedicated officers in the Topaz team, helped us with disruption, but also relational work with that child. One officer.
I meant you to say acronyms or something, the committee. Okay, so
Topaz. So Topaz is not an acronym, it's just the name of the operation, the police team. So formally, though many of you might have heard of it, because Topaz was a whole team responding to all exploitation for children, but now it's a targeted team focusing on sexual exploitation. So they did that real relational work with a targeted officer, building a relationship with that child, talking to her parents, not just stepping back and waiting for them to attend the police station. Children's social care with real dynamic commitment across all levels of management in that safeguarding team. The social worker, the team manager and the operation manager really actively working and reviewing the needs. Our exploitation team doing meaningful, intensive relational work to facilitate disclosure and it properly inform safety planning. And out of that, we were able to identify names of perpetrators and addresses. In share, our housing rep was able to identify that one of the addresses was in local authority housing stock. So lo and behold, the tenancy officer went and did a few more door knocks than they might usually do to check the stairwell and make sure that things were in working order and do a little bit of disruption, alongside the work that happened in the Bridge, which is so the Bridge is a health service for specialist screening, forensic assessment and examination in response when children have experienced sexual harm. They were really creative, really dynamic, allowed her to come to her appointment with a police officer and her intervention worker and her social worker. They were really open to what that child needed to engage. College engaging in flexible interviews to facilitate her engagement in post-16 education. Parents and a sister were a significant part of that protective network. So we're in a place where we're looking at harm that is outside of the home, not attributable to our parents. They want to contribute to our safety plans and be part of those protective networks. And the community itself recognising and us being able to triangulate this child as a victim, not just in the places and spaces we knew about, reporting. So a train station staff member was able to report seeing her experiencing harm from an adult, and CCTV footage was able to identify that she was that victim, name her, link all of that information and triangulate. The outcome of that intensive support relational work is that that child is now completely away from any of that exploitation. We usually, you know, we're looking at our looked after children coming into care because they need to be protected from their parents. In this case, we've used that system in order to protect her from her lack of capacity and ability to recognise that she was so groomed and so entrenched in the exploitation she was experiencing. So she's gone to a specialist placement. She's completely broken those ties and relationships. Her family are coming into that space with her, and the next phase of that is a reunification back home, and that really positive outcome for her, which took a lot of work and a lot of oversight, but actually everybody just flexing a little bit in their usual working space meant that we were able to really make a difference for that child. We're really proud of that piece of work.
Ready for the next one? Yeah. So in response to identifying that we did have a clear gap across our strategic work with exploitation, we set up the strategic exploitation group in October of last year, and key members of that group, including Sarah and Lisa, who are with us today, have met regularly, monthly actually, since that time, to implement and think about what we need to do in strategic response to exploitation across all ages. We have also invited adults into that space and thinking about how we can think about our safeguarding approaches and our frameworks around adults and some of our most vulnerable care leavers that are in that space, that we recognising those gaps. The work that we've done to date is to review the governance structure and set a clear structure for which I will come to in a minute. We've looked at all of those, our triage and response pathways, worked closely with Somerset Safeguarding Children's Partnership to ensure that we have places on their website that partners and professionals can access with ease to understand how they respond to any concern they may have. We've reviewed and had a working group to develop the new exploitation screening tool, and we have supported across the partnership alongside the violence reduction steering group, set up an exploitation and serious youth violence conference. So you will see from the next slide, a bit slow, isn't it? So this is just setting out our governance structure, and you can see the Somerset Strategic Exploitation Group now sits alongside the Somerset Violence Reduction Partnership and the Youth Justice Partnership Board, and those three groups meet quarterly, and they produce reports into the Safer Somerset Partnership to give that reassurance and assurance of all the work that we're doing, which then will feed into on our 6 monthly report up to executive and the partnership and statutory boards to again give that assurance about the work and the impact that we are having. So those governance structures will continue to be reviewed as we develop and understand the impact that they are having. The next slide, we're going into the deep dive we did into early identification, and you'll see from this flow chart, it shows just how I suppose dynamic all of those panels and groups are that discuss children. So the new group that we've introduced is VARG, which is the Vulnerable Adolescent Response Group, and that is to ensure that we are identifying children at the earliest possible point of coming to the attention of the police, and that we can intervene and offer an intervention at that point. So rather than waiting for them to come into our front door or referral into the services when the needs have escalated and those risks are of a concern, we can intervene and get there in earlier. We've also re-established our Safer Somerset Partnership Priority Meeting that is led currently by the police. And again, that is an opportunity for the community to come together to share information, think about those places, spaces and people and how we might respond as a community partnership to address some of those and ensure that we've got the right information being shared at the right time. Then we've also introduced a share panel, which if we go to the next slide, Sarah's going to talk through how those new panels have come to fruition and how they will work across the partnership.
So hopefully what you'll recognise on the previous slide is some of those meetings will be things that you're aware of, the family front door, those processes that were already in existence. These are the 3 new panels that have been introduced following the joint targeted area inspection. And the first of those was at the end of 2024, which is the police-led Safer Somerset priority meetings. And those are a massive community team of professionals who respond to a range of needs, all ages, places, spaces, individuals, groups. We've had a particular pub in one town discussed there. We've had a particular park in another town discussed there. We've had individual children, individual adults, and a number of actions, outcomes, disruption work from those meetings. A police inspector leads those. The VRP and one team staff feed into those and support those. And children's services all also attend and make sure we triangulate that information. And the main purpose is for those emerging and escalating concerns across the community for all ages to have somewhere to have a response, a coordinated response through a clear referral pathway. Our weekly meeting, the Vulnerable Adolescent Response Group, VARG, is a youth justice and police-led meeting that the front door education and children's social care partners attend, where every child that has come to the attention of the police in the previous week get a live response every Friday. So those children are reviewed, making sure they've got a service, making sure they've got the right people involved, and if they haven't, signposting them to the places and spaces that they need to be alongside the provision of intervention if appropriate. And then at the top end for our children, where all of that usual offer is not de-escalating the risk or bringing about the change we want to see to them, for them, that they all should be open. These children should already be open and experiencing a service from children's. So operations managers in children's escalate into our share panel, which is our serious harm action and reducing exploitation forum. So the Somerset version of MACE or MAVE, whatever, you know, other local authorities have lots of different names. And in that meeting, like the case example I gave you, we bring those children where they're experiencing harm, and whatever we've tried and all of the intervention we've already done isn't working. What might we all be able to do in a coordinated way to really try to make a difference for those children?
So I'm going to break my own rule, and I apologise for it, because it just you talk about community, coming to me, and probably some of the members around the community are the people we represent, the Mr. and Mrs. Public, those sorts of things. You don't necessarily mean members of the public.
Not members of the public.
No.
No,
So,
yeah.
So could you clarify, because the use of community, I don't know if members tell me if I'm wrong, but to me, seems and feels like Mr. and Mrs. Public.
So that, from my perspective, would mean third party, voluntary, those groups and services that are based in local communities and know those local people, know the places and
partners, stakeholders,
absolutely,
and stuff, rather than
from, you know, a housing officer to a voluntary service, all of those people that come into that relevant meeting. And there's a Safer Somerset priorities meeting, one for the east of the county, one for the west of the county. So we're able to sort of try and refine that a little bit rather than it be a county-wide approach. No worries.
So we've launched the Somerset Safeguarding Children Partnership initial response pathway in response to all of the work that we've done. So it's a place where professionals and agencies, whether that's your youth worker or a police officer or a school member of staff, can access and see clearly how you would respond to any concerns or worries that you may have about a child or a place or a group of people or a space, and how you may respond to that and get the support that you need. Next slide. We've also launched the multi-agency exploitation screening tool, which again, in both inspections, recognised that we weren't using the current or previous exploitation tool consistently to get the information that we required in order to respond to children. So after a lot of work with various partners, we've developed the new screening tool, which we hope will be much more accessible across the partnership, easier to complete, give the information we need to ensure that we can use that in our referral routes in, or that so the person completing it will have a clear understanding of what those risks are for that child. And then the final bit of work that we've been doing over the last couple months is around developing our exploitation strategy, and it's an all-age strategy. So with 7 clear strategic priorities around leadership and governance, prevention, early identification, and that assessment process, and about how we ensure that we understand the needs and those risks for those children, the support and recovery, disruption and enforcement, workforce development, and again, community engagement. And so in that space, again, we're talking about how we engage with community services, whether that be early help, voluntary, faith, statutory services, all in one place, so we can respond to children and families there. The exploitation strategy will be hopefully finalised within the next month, and will be launched alongside a very clear action plan of the next steps we'd like to take over the next 2-3 years.
And then just to give you some detail around service offer and how we're responding directly to children, hopefully many of you will be aware that in 2018, the Local Authority Children's Services really started to think about the targeted offer in response to our concerns for children being exploited in Somerset, and the needs, the impact and the work that needed to happen in response to Fenestra. So we had our first lead social worker for exploitation, who was sort of an independent person working across the whole county, one voice. We now come to where we are in 2026, and we have an entire ROF offer, which stands for risks outside of the home. Language that we use in Somerset. Lots of other local authorities have different language, contextual risk, contextual harm. I even heard HOF in a meeting the other day, harm outside of the home. So it's just about understanding that for our children, our focus is on the pull factors, not the push factors. So if the needs of our children are the result of push, things that are happening in the home, and they're being pushed out of the home, not looked after, and not having their needs met, that sits with our usual offer. This team is all about responding to the pull factors, the community issues, the relationships, the criminality, the exploitation, the things that are pulling them out of that home, especially if that home is part of their safe network and safe spaces. So we've got that one team. On the next slide, you'll see that we have done a number of pieces of work in response to exploitation risks outside of the home. We've introduced a specialist parenting worker who's worked with over 55 parents to stabilise children and create safety in their home. 129 new children came into our complex early service at the complex level before they reach acute, and 83 of those have now closed, with 85% of decreased need and stepping down into community resources. We have had 130 CE consultations where we're encouraging all of our colleagues across children's services to reach out to us for advice, guidance, signposting, mapping. The screening tools in-house have always been sort of regularly completed, but what we recognise is we needed a better tool for our partners to use. So that's going to correlate, and we're all going to use the same tool. 20 of those children have had a specialist child in need ROF response, so at that acute level. So we're making sure that those children are getting the same response from the same team for continuity, which we think is really positive because it aligns with a lot of the messages around family help in the social work reforms, of having one team responding to children and them not having to be passed around from team to team and stepped up and stepped down. We want that one offer in one team. We have been contributing to training for our partners. And part of that offer is bringing our correlation of that team now sitting in youth justice, where our 80 children open in exploitation are also 70% the same children in our youth justice cohort, 80% of our children that have missing episodes. So we've brought them all into one space, one team, and I have the absolute privilege of driving that work forward over the next year or so to really refine that purpose and make sure we're not duplicating, but we're working as effectively around those children as possible. And the next slide, a big part of that is that we've relaunched the name of that team as WAVE, working against violence and exploitation for our children across Somerset. The positions and skills within that team can be seen there. We're correlating and linking across to our seconded resource in youth justice, and it's an amazing opportunity for us to do better for those children and respond to those concerns raised in the joint targeted area inspection. There's also a slide there that the next slide just touches on what we covered at our conference and the collaboration and partnership we had in that space. The feedback we've had has been amazing. The draft report for feedback has just come in today, so we're happy to share that once it's been finalised if you'd like that. And the final slide for us is just clarifying that, yeah, it's all about that vision to action work.
And now we will work collectively with the partners to finalise and launch the exploitation strategy, as I mentioned earlier, agree the specific action plan that we need to do and where that sits, and the promotion and embedding of our triage and response pathway, our screening tool and those panels to ensure that we get the right children discussed at the right place to ensure those positive outcomes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. You come back across then if you like. I think so. I'll ask members to indicate if they want to speak, and Evie will make a note. Failing that, I do have some questions. But it's first of all, thank you for the presentation. I don't know about the members around the room, but A, you brought it to life, which I think is important. But B, I think has helped in my mind clarify some of the rationale why the auditor has asked us to look at it, because as members, we have a different sort of assurance, a different perspective than of our members, a lot of our officers and stakeholders. Let me explain that a little bit. I think I've learned a lot in that last 20 minutes about things that are going on in my community that I never knew was going on in my community. The different bodies coming together, different conversations that we've been having, and I think that's maybe why what the auditor thought about coming. And so I've got some questions, but it's more about, so how are members going to be assured that you're doing what you're doing, and how is that done? I've got a question. I'm looking for questions, members, so, but I'll do my first one. So it's interesting you started off talking about information sharing. Anyone in the room will tell you that's one of my favourite subjects, as the fact that we do not share data effectively, or if we do, it's got the wrong tag on it. Child A might be called X, Y, Z in one world and A, B, C in another, and there's no correlation between it. So how are we sharing data? Is it being done robustly, and has it got better?
So initially, my view will be that we have really good triangulation in our data sharing with youth justice and with the police and with health because of the Youth Justice Board and HMIP reporting requirements. So part of this work is we've been able to work with Vicky Harden in the data team to correlate some of that and make sure that how she is reporting across those systems around offences, children coming to the police attention, we're also able to use in our wider context with the exploitation and serious youth violence work. I think one of the things you'll see on the end of the report that has been submitted is how we're able to report on the decrease in violent offences linked to serious youth violence. And for us, that's because we're able to correlate that data and recognise the same children in the same space. Our work on Power BI has significantly improved our ability to report outputs, and all of those dashboards report on the same data from the same spaces, so that really helps us as well. I think there's always work for us to do because data is numbers that we can all choose to interpret in the way we want to interpret. So I guess from my perspective on a daily basis, numbers mean one thing. What would be really helpful for us is to know what you would need to hear and how you would need that to be aligned, so then we can make sure we incorporate that into how we report.
Thank you. So I'll come back onto how the what we expect going forward in future questions I've got, because I think that's one of the things that will come out of this. But Claire's looking to say so. But my question is more about the single identifier number. I think there's something going through government at the moment which potentially will mean that everyone starts singing with at the same number from the beginning. So have we already dealt with it? Or will the paper change that, Claire?
I was actually going to say, I wonder if it would be helpful to hear from Lisa and Sarah in terms of the police and the health perspective. So if I just answer that question first before they come in. We don't yet have a single identifier. We think that number is likely to be the child's NHS number. So we have now got on the social care record system every child's social care records number and the NHS number in anticipation that that will move into one system. We also have a system called Transform, which is available across a lot of professionals in different organisations, which identifies children and everybody who is involved with that child and the risks or whatever they may be at risk of, that everybody can see the same information. So it's not just the local authority, it includes people like the drug and alcohol services, other adult services. Some people in schools can access that information, lots of people in health can access that information. So we're all seeing it through the same lens, and that's being expanded. So we have a broader range of people who are all able to both input data and also therefore see the bigger picture that we can all see consistently.
Good to hear. Thank you. Lisa, did you want to come in?
I think it's been really well covered. I think the additional point I would make is that in terms of this work, our systems record really carefully aliases and names otherwise known as, and so for children, for example, where there have been perhaps different family names or different spellings, that our system does pick that up. So in terms of sharing the data that we need to share, the tests and the checks before it comes across are robust. Do I think that it's absolutely foolproof? No, it isn't. But there's definite connectivity before the information.
I would only add that we share it very carefully. Health information, along with our partners in the police and social care, is highly complex, highly confidential information. So we share it very carefully. One of the outstanding actions from a health perspective is to ensure that our partners in our urgent care service, so somebody who phones 111 in Somerset goes through to our urgent care partner, they currently don't have access to CIDR, which is our shared care record. We are working very carefully to make that happen, but given the number of data breaches, some of which will have come to national attention, there is a whole host of complex information governance processes we must work through with due diligence in order to assure ourselves that information is shared both robustly but also safely, because none of us want to see highly complex, highly confidential information landing in the public eye, on the dark web, etc., as we've sadly heard so many times. So I think my response is to provide assurance that we absolutely are signed up to sharing information, but there are processes to go through in order to do it safely, hence why one of our remaining actions is to get our urgent care service on board with CIDR so they have full access to the information they need to work to protect our most vulnerable people.
Thank you. Lisa?
Sorry, as Sarah was rightly talking, it just triggered the other part from our activity in the JTI, which did talk to, did we share enough early enough? Just for clarity, some of that relates to, in a similar vein, we get to hear significant intelligence that then leads to very confidential operations that we don't even share amongst our own staff. So there is in the JTI feedback some connectivity with what we might not be able to share ever, albeit not putting a child at risk by not doing it, because we are pursuing a really serious criminal gang, for example.
No, I get that, and the reason I keep harping on about data, because there are always going to be reasons not to share, but we need to find a way to be able to share it in an effective way that makes it, and forgive me repeating myself, members, but the bit I always use is the morning after pill. A young lady could go to chemist 1, chemist 2, chemist 3, and that information may not necessarily be shared to link up the fact that it's going through. That's just what off the top of my head, and I may be completely out of kilter with that, but I think it's a good example of what I mean by share that there's low-level data that can be shared in a more effective way to benefit and to help lines draw together. Evie, do you want to ask your question?
So I just want a little bit of a more bigger explanation, please. For the Safer Somerset Priorities meeting, you said you've got East and West. I do understand how vast Somerset is, But I think if we create those divides, we may have gaps. And that concerns me massively because I didn't see there where the East and West are going to come and talk, because crime and harm does not have those boundaries. You know, missing episodes, exploitation, it's everywhere. How are we going to make sure that we are so robust with those conversations, please?
Shall I take that?
Pass that to Lisa, yeah.
So you're absolutely right, and the frustrations in doing all of this well is the volume that populates those meetings, even divided in two every fortnight. There are more cases that we could fit in with the time and the restrictions and the threat that we have. So we have to divide it in some form that allows partners to all those partners you saw on the screen that Sarah presented there. That there's more behind that as well. So in terms of efficiency, being able to subdivide it in some sort of way that has the right partners in the right place at the right time with the knowledge is really tricky. So there is always a risk that something will slip through a boundary design. We are still set up, rightly or wrongly, in an East and West structure, both in policing and in all the other key partnerships. We obviously are moving to localities as an organisation. We're moving to families first. There will be improvement in the way that we brigade as a set of partners. So it is, I suppose, a little bit clumsy that we've kept an old structure of East and West because we've got the partners that understand the setup in those areas, and it is a meaningful size meeting to allow people to be able to come. When we've tried to subdivide it into four, and we have looked at that, you've then got people that are going to all four. It becomes unwieldy. Doing it as one means that you haven't got necessarily the themes and the experts in the room. So it's not set in stone. It will remain like this. I think the localities models, the family first model, gives us opportunities, but at the moment it's the way that suits the partnership knowledge and the ability to attend, quite crudely.
Thank you.
I don't know if it is helpful to add in the context of reassurance that from a police perspective, the same inspector chairs both East and West. The EIT, the early intervention teams from police, are the key attendees. From a children's services perspective, it's my team that attends both East and West. I then share and feed up. So the lines of continuity are through teams with consistency and oversight. Does that make sense? So where we can bridge the gap, we are bridging those gaps. And when there is cover brought in, so for example, if I can't share, Hannah Dyke, another OM chairs share. So we try and bring that continuity around the work, how it's recorded, and that space is then shared really appropriately through the VRP for, say, for Somerset, and through our casework panels for children's, to make sure that information is all accessible, recorded on the relevant systems wherever appropriate. So we do everything we can to mitigate those risks, but yeah, Lisa's absolutely right. We can only, we have to try and refine that offer as much as we possibly can.
Thanks for that. I've got a couple of members to ask us, but I've got so many, I'll jump in with a couple in between. It's more a matter, so looking at the report and where we are, there's lots of good news stories there, there's lots of information, but I'm assuming this question may go to the three different areas in the room, but I'll ask the question anyway. So which of the JTI and the HMIP improvement actions do you now regard as fully embedded as business as usual practice, in opposed to what we didn't do before, what we do now from it? I know that I've dropped that question on. What does anyone fancy to going first on that one? So what is, to me, and I'll waffle while you think about it. To me, this is some of the reason why this has come back. One of there has to have been something that's happened for each of you that you now, as it do something differently, which is business as usual, which is a benefit for a learning, something that's come out of this process.
Shall I go first?
Lisa, thank you. You've just, Claire's just breathed a big sigh of relief.
No, not at all. Tell me if I'm not getting what you're asking. I think, so there isn't anything that we've stopped doing that we're now doing from a partnership perspective, in my view, or from a policing perspective. We've honed some of the things we were doing well in some areas to make them better, and it's also brought alive a lot of sort of soul searching as to how we could have done not just children's business better, but partnership business better. But I think also what we need to bear in mind is it's 2 years further on, organisations, all of our organisations have developed rapidly. For policing, and I'll talk to that, we have not because of the JTI, but certainly it benefits. We have now got, for example, a public protection unit. We had one years ago. We disbanded it in the cuts from 2010 onwards when we had to shrink our resource and put our expertise in all different places. We've now realised the benefits of having a public protection unit and reinstigated it, which largely talks to nearly all the bits of training, information sharing and expertise at the earliest stage that come out of the JTI. So that's happened, which sort of underwrite some of the actions and override some of them as well. We've had a new geographic model that landed on the 3rd of November, which puts our neighbourhood teams and our response teams under one line management so that they're able to see what are the issues and where are the places and spaces we need to be, with much more clarity under one leadership that can direct it. So that wasn't because of the JTI, but it definitely improves the actions that remained outstanding when we did those things. I hope that is answering what you're aiming at.
Thank you. That's good. Claire, did you want to go?
I think the example that was given in relation to partnerships, I'd say that partnership structure in terms of the way that children are identified, the way that they work through that system, how we identify children at the highest risk, how we work with them, is now embedded. If you look back at the reports from the inspection, particularly the JTI inspection, the governance and the movement of children through that system was, to be fair, chaotic and largely random in places. So children were not getting the best service and not getting the best support because the right people weren't necessarily being consulted or did not know that that child was at risk. I think this system that has been described today in terms of partnerships, it now is embedded and there's a real consistency. You saw in the number of children that have been worked with where there are good outcomes, there's a consistency in that approach, which is evident, which is having an impact, which is evidenced by the number of children who've actually benefited from it.
Thank you. Sarah, did you want to add anything? Don't worry if you haven't, I can move on.
No, I would just reiterate what's been said, and I for me in health, having a strategic oversight of the health system, I think the training and the hours that have been put in by staff and their managers across the health system to understand what sexual exploitation is and what to do about it is really now paying dividends. And I was really interested to hear conversations at the conference a couple of weeks ago and hear people talking about this in a much more knowledgeable and confident way. So having a more confident workforce obviously is going to have an impact for positive outcomes for our children. And specifically in the health service, our specialist nurse and them now having a whole role to look at specific children and their journey through the health services has also really embedded, and that is all because of the awareness raising that has happened as a result of the JTI. So yeah, a really positive improving. And I think I'd just acknowledge as well, there is still work for us to do in terms of the impact of some of this, the strategy, the new screening tool, and the new pathway. We do still need to do work around measuring the impact of that.
Thank you. Did someone want to come in? No? I'll go on then. Just so, okay, Claire used the partnership word, and my next question is going to be, so that the report acknowledges the progress has been varied across partners. So I want to try and understand how partners are being held to account where progress is slower, and where or by who is it challenged and reported? It's about the governance, the oversight of that. Who's holding each other to account?
Answer that. So the plan for the JTI is held by the Safeguarding Children's Partnership. There is an executive of that partnership, which, thinking about it, is peopled by me, Lisa, and the chief nurse, who is Sheila Meldrum from the ICB. So although we are leading the strands of work, if you like, in our own organisations, we're also holding each other to account in that forum to make sure that the work is being completed. It has been a bumpy ride. I think we need to be honest that the last 2 years in terms of getting this work done, we have had some organisations being less committed at various points and other organisations then trying to fill the gap and that not working because it has to be a partnership and we all have to work through it together. So I think there's been some really intensive work to try and get us into the right place. I think, as Lisa said with the police, that the police needed to really shift the organisation of their organisation, if you like, the structure of their organisation, so that it actually worked for children in terms of around serious youth violence. So, as Lisa said, public protection unit coming back in, the local officers being in that line management chain has had a really big impact. But obviously that wasn't going to happen overnight. So to some degree, the plan was stuck to some degree in some places until that reorganisation of that had come into place. Other elements of it could continue, but the overarching plan could not make huge progress until we got all those bits of structure in all these different organisations right.
Anyone else want to come in? Lisa, Sarah, and okay, I'll go on. I'll follow that on.
Oh, sorry. Well, so I will add, and we have all been, because Claire did coin the phrase, rightly so, that we were really good at reassurance of each other, but the assurance bit wasn't necessarily strong. And above this, the exec group sits all of our key chief execs, and we have indeed, when it's been clunky in that 2 years, escalated ourselves that we are stuck with stuff, and that we, and sorry to summarise it as stuff, but where it has got stuck, we've been very clear to say we are really struggling. This is what we want to do. This is what we need to do, and being very transparent in getting that senior support to help us unpick it.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mention that. So the just to explain to the committee, the law effectively requires us through Working Together to Safeguard Children, which was revised in 2023, to have designated safeguarding partners in the local area and then lead safeguarding partners who are more senior. So the designated safeguarding partners for Somerset under our safeguarding partnership are me, Lisa and Sheila Meldrum, but the lead safeguarding partners are the chief executive in the council, the chief constable, so Sarah Crew, and the chief executive of the ICB. So as Lisa says, when things are not working, we can escalate to them to say, this really isn't working. We need either some direction, some advice, or we need you as lead safeguarding partners to do something that we can't actually implement on our own. So we have the most senior in each organisation's validation, effectively.
So this is the Children and Family Scrutiny body. This is the member body, which I suppose will be, where do we sit in that? Where is the member oversight? Where is the assurance that things are progressing? How do we know as members of the council that things are progressing?
So in one of the diagrams, I think it's in the partnership diagram, it goes through the Safer Somerset Partnership and through the ICS, Children and Young People's Partnership Board, in terms of progress reports. The member involvement, there is no member involvement in either of those groups, but it is perfectly possible for the committee to ask for regular reports from the Safeguarding Partnership in relation to any aspect of the Safeguarding Partnership's work. We have brought here before updates on the Children and Young People's Plan and other aspects of the work of the Safeguarding Partnership. So if you wanted as a committee to ask for regular updates on serious youth violence and the outcomes of the JTI and the Youth Justice Inspection, we could certainly do that.
Okay, members, I think I might be something that we want to make a recommendation in a minute. I've got a number of people. I'm sorry that Heather.
That's all right, easily forgotten. No, yeah, I was just also going to say, in addition to that, of course, the Safer Somerset Partnership does have lead members on it. Bill comes to it, Sarah comes to it. Sorry, Bill Revan's lead of the council, Sarah Wakefield as adults lead member, myself. So that will have some member involvement at the Safer Somerset Board. And of course, one of the responsibilities that I would have as lead member for Children's is to ensure we have that kind of safeguarding sort of quartet bit, which we do throughout the quarterly safeguarding report board. Is that right? Review board. So that would be like I would be in rooms with our chief exec, with the DCS, with the lead member. For the leader for the council and myself. It's that, and that's where our kind of final backstop on kind of member oversight, if you like, for the most challenging and most important safeguarding issues.
Thank you for that, but I think my gut tells me that Grant Thornton may have asked us, Children and Family Scrutiny, to look at it, because I think it's that member oversight that's there. I've got Francis, Martin, Ruth, Henry, and then Marcus. So Francis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's really good to hear all the things that are going on, and things are clearly moving, which is great. I've got various questions that I'd like to ask. One is a very little one, though I think with far-reaching implications, which I was interested to see that return home interviews and missing work has been included in this for everybody. That sounds to me an enormously sensible thing. I see that we're managing about 80% of return home interviews, which I believe is better than we used to do. I'd just like a few words on how that is working and what contribution it makes to the whole of this. Then can I go on with can I go on with my list, or do you rather stop? Go on with the list? Yeah, okay. The next one, we've talked, the J title was about serious youth violence. We've talked specifically about child sexual exploitation, which is a part of child exploitation. Are we looking at that as a proxy for the whole thing, or are we actually saying that child exploitation, including child sexual exploitation, is actually the key element of all serious youth violence? If not, then we probably will want to hear about other things as well appropriately. The next question is really on the partnership thing. Do we all now have a shared view of how we should look at children and young people who are involved in violence, exploitation, and so on? Or are we still are there still some places where children might be regarded more of as a nuisance and misbehaving rather than being victims of the way adults are treating them? Or do we now all recognise risk to children in the same way and children's behaviour in the same way? And if not, do we need to do more work on that?
Hold it there for a second, and I will let you come back. Do you want to deal with those first ones first, and then let Francis back in?
I suggest Sam answers the question about missing, and also the question about whether exploitation makes up the majority of the serious youth violence cohort, or if there are other factors in it. Want to answer those two, Sam?
So with regard to the missing, so we have a dedicated team within prevention that do the return home interviews, and they've been consistently sat within the prevention team. The difference that we think it's going to make by bringing them alongside the exploitation team will be, as Sarah touched on, quite often it's the same children that are at risk of exploitation that are going missing. And in developing our Power BI dashboards, we now get a much better and accurate picture of those children that are going missing and what other risk factors they've got and how we respond to it. So that is hugely beneficial. What we've also done, as you will see from our previous Ofsted inspection, I think at that point we were only making contact with up to 36% of children, and now, as you can see, that's significantly increased to over 80%, and that's us making contact with those children within 72 hours of them being found. I would expect, and that's probably what the data would tell us, the 20% that we don't make contact with is because they've more often than not gone missing again, so we're unable to contact them. But now Sarah and I have got our Power BI dashboard, so we can absolutely see all those risk factors, all of those touch points, all of those key information in one place, so we can understand what's going on for all those children and make a difference. And then think about those push and pull factors for those children that go missing. You know, what's pulling them from home, what difference do we need to make, and then set really clear risk assessment and action plans to stop them going missing again. Does that answer your question, Francis?
That's very helpful, thank you.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and then the next question, if exploitation makes up the majority of serious youth violence cohort, no, in essence it's not always, but there is a clear link there. So we do have a number of children that are either at risk or being exploited that don't come across to that, you know, or demonstrate serious youth violence activity or become a victim of that. But then we do have a number of children that are, and the numbers of children in Somerset that actually fall into that serious youth violence are quite small compared to the children that we have got that are at risk of exploitation. Would you be fair to say that, Sarah?
Yeah, so my view would be that the children that have been involved in incidents of serious youth violence, most of them will have had previous indicators or previous involvement with services. One of the things we haven't been good at, and I'm sure that Lisa will acknowledge this from a police perspective as well, is acknowledging our children linked to offences as victims in their own right. So the use of the national referral mechanism, and also how we report our information into Intel so that the police can triangulate that, particularly in relation to exploitation. So if we look at the 83 children open to our exploitation at complex at the moment, 50% of those children have had missing episodes, and also 40% of those children have got youth justice team involvement. So it's about how we recognise in one space the correlation and crossover between those children, and absolutely children that display serious youth violence in many contexts, particularly in relation to peer on peer abuse, have there's vulnerabilities to or evidence of emerging exploitation risks. We can't substantiate they are definitely victims, but we can see the vulnerabilities they have in the networks that they're involved in. So we have a really clear view that this is not just about exploitation, it's about risks outside of the home, it's about the pull factors, and it's about the impact that those have on children's trajectory, lifelong trajectory. And I'm confident that we're getting the right people in the right space to move those conversations forward in a really constructive way. And it is, yeah, as Sam said, and people have touched on, impact and outcomes. For a long time, we've been talking about these children, and we feel like because we've talked about them, we maybe have met their needs or reduced our concern. But what we aren't seeing is enough impact and change, and that's the direction of travel for us to go in.
Thank you.
We haven't really talked about do we all look in the same way at children, and do we all recognise risk at the same sort of level? Do we agree on level of risk?
Lisa.
I was going to come to that. I think Sarah gave me a good segue there, not necessarily answering your whole point of your question, I don't think, Francis, but it is a cultural shift. We probably do need to acknowledge in policing from the J-time to this point, we were behind the curve. We've got a whole culture and a whole generation of officers who have been on the receiving end of let's just say challenged or dysfunctional children who have caused some serious harm to individuals, who have taken it out on officers, who have been arrested, who through the JTI we identified were not seeing that they were vulnerable in the first, that ultimately they're still a child. What do we do to see that their vulnerability and their trauma is the first port of call and work backwards? But that said, it's really complex because there is a point where we've in the last 2 years we've completely backtracked. We've done loads of training about trauma, and what we saw when we had some significant Bridgewater violence in 2020, January 25, was that we had officers that then wouldn't stop search children, who wouldn't arrest children. We've got courts that won't necessarily remand children who have committed the most serious crimes repetitively with knives. They're a risk to themselves, actually, not let alone the public. So it's a really difficult balance to do, to assess the risk to the individual, to make sure it's trauma informed, to make sure we're doing everything we can with a child focused lens. That is the most important thing. But ultimately, there are still offences and offenders that could take their own lives or others that we have to operate the criminal justice system in. So, training 6,000 people in our organisation to think differently than we ever have before is not without risk to how we do that well.
Thank you very, very much. And I wouldn't for a minute think that children who have been damaged can't damage other people. And we do, that has to be dealt with. May I go on with the rest? Thank you. If the inspectors came back today, would they feel that we're in the right place, or that we're making sufficient progress, or would they still be worried? Would they be less worried? Would they be more worried? I think they'd be less worried, but it would be good to have a sort of view on that. Secondly, in terms of oversight, now we have an independent person involved with the Safeguarding Children Partnership, don't we? No, not anymore. Does that not happen? Right. Okay. Fine. Forget that question, because I was wondering whether that could be part of the challenge. But if that doesn't, and I suppose my question about whether what would, if the inspectors came back today, what would they feel? Is I looked at the spreadsheet that was sent round. Huge amounts of work are going on. There is a sheet of some numbers of actions that are blue and completed. Lots of discussion is happening. Lots of efforts are being made, but there's an awful lot of red on it. And the red in there is an explanation, because people use RAG ratings differently, but red says we're really worried about it. The next most lot is we're a bit worried about it, and there's very little that's actually green. So that's really the back context of that question. And the last thing is actually just something I want to say. I'm afraid I'm with Lee on this. Data breaches, if they save a child's life or save a child from serious harm, I'm not sure I mind how embarrassing it is that and how much people might be worried about the information getting out. And absolutely, I understand the need not to put at risk police operations which might prevent future harm. But in the way that an ambulance may not go past something they see in order to go to something they're intending to go to, the child who is at risk of being damaged now is hugely important and is the one in front of you. So I'm afraid that's just something I wanted to say. But the question is about what would the inspectors feel? Are we actually making the progress we should?
Okay, it's an interesting question. I'm not sure I want to get inside inspectors' heads, to be honest. But my belief from those two inspections is what inspectors were looking at and wanted to see was, are children identified really early? Do we get in there early before children get into a real mess in terms of being involved in exploitation, either as a victim or as a perpetrator or both, which has lifelong consequences? We were doing that badly. And I think they also wanted to see that the partnership was working as a partnership to try and protect children, to help them, to make sure that we got the right resources in at the right time. So I think in terms of those particular elements, if inspectors came back, well, they will come back at some point, but when they come back, I would expect them to see a very different way of working, to see that children are protected much earlier, that we are working much more closely as a partnership, and we know the cohorts of children who are at risk, need early support much better, and we have a shared understanding of that in a way that we didn't before. I accept that there are still areas on those plans that are red. I think they are largely things that need to be done, and which is why they're red and haven't been done, but they're not impacting directly on our children identified early, and are they protected effectively across the partnership. So I think the core of what inspectors were looking for has been achieved, and I would expect inspectors to see that we are working very differently and children are getting a much better deal effectively from the work that we're doing as a partnership, but to see that there is still work to do on some of the other aspects that would improve that offer even more.
Thank you, Francis. Martin Lovell, Councillor Lovell.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for this. It's a completely comprehensive structure in place to deal with this major issue. Question I've got is, somebody can always slip through unnoticed. So I suppose my question is, what are the antennae at the front of this, picking up what needs to be picked up, and how thorough is it? Thank you.
I think the VARG panel that we touched on, the vulnerable adolescent response group, is one of our key early indicators, because every child that's come into the attention of the police is coming onto that panel. 30-40 children, sometimes a lot more, in a week, where we're making sure they've got a service, they've been seen, we know about them. I think that we're also really clear about our early indicators at the front door, and that this pathway hopefully will guide more of that work. One of the things we did need to improve around that antennae is not just indicators of significant exploitation, which our old screening tool relied on quite heavily, but the vulnerability factors. So, for example, some reflections we've done recently across lots of the partners around tattoos on children and how those are coming about and what they might indicate, because in isolation a parent might be more outraged that their child's come home with a tattoo rather than understand what that could be a vulnerability indicator for in the future, or future harm, grooming, branding, all of those things. So we're confident we're building that up in our partnership. Our conference was attended by, despite being on the day of, I'm just sure many of you have experienced the wonderful flooding that we've had across our local authority. 200 attendees still came into that partnership event, coordinated by the VRP to make sure all of the right people are given places and spaces in that room, and it's not just overwhelmed by experts. Our training offer has now been reinvigorated for this year with the SSCP, and that is partnership training that's free to access for all partners to encourage people to reach out and think. The other thing that we are really driving is the use of the Intel portal so that people can think about indicators of exploitation, feed those into one place, and then they build a picture around children, places, spaces, adults. We had a really amazing presentation at the conference from the lead officer in the Intel section of the force, and she spoke to us about the fact that if every person reported seeing that saw the red BMW in the car park every night at 6 o'clock picking up children, the police would get closer and closer to finding out whose that red BMW was and were those children at risk, you know, rather than us assuming it's a dad picking his children up, which many of us might do. So there's lots of work for us to do, but we are reaching out into those spaces as well as encouraging people to reach in and share that information. Our early intervention teams and neighbourhood police teams are doing a lot of work, and I'm sure Lisa can touch on and tell you how they're being active and proactive, and the preventative work they're doing in communities, as well as the reactive work when crimes are reported and people are unsafe. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. If it's quick, because I've got a long list, and otherwise we'll be
yeah, I
here
suppose.
till 8 o'clock.
Thank you. Yes. I'm thinking of the people who do, you know, somebody who doesn't go to school is obviously going to be picked up. What, I mean, are we encouraging our teachers to pick up things that that they ought to feel they ought to pass on? Thank you, Chair. That's it.
Yeah, absolutely. A big piece of our work is reaching out into schools. We also have a statutory responsibility as a local authority to respond to those children that are missing education. And part of that is triangulation into our team and that prevention space. And I know Amelia is online, and I'm sure she will touch on the relationships, especially in the last 18 months, that really close working and the build up that we've got alongside our colleagues in the Education Directorate, our virtual school, the broadening of that offer. All of that hopefully is really helping us reach into those spaces. I'm now attending myself every head teacher briefing so that we're reaching out into those spaces and promoting that information.
Thank you. I see we have Amelia. Put your hand up. Thank you. Welcome. Thank you for taking the time to join us. I hope you're feeling well. You're in our thoughts anyway.
Thank you, Councillor Edmund. Yeah, I would just absolutely. I don't know if I could say it, but you know, any better than has just been said. But I would absolutely concur. I think what we've been trying to achieve, and we are seeing the fruits of that, is a step change in terms of operating as one children's services, and not just children's services. We've got partners here today, and we work very closely with all of them. And that is about us being able to smooth out the experience of parents, families, children, and professionals who are at Suave here today, their experience on the ground of us being a joined up system, because when these things emerge, it is about how effectively we can identify those things and put something in place at an early stage, because it's very, very unusual that these challenging scenarios arise out of nowhere. There is a long tail. They do start quite often with things like that happen in the school space, like non-attendance, like exclusion or suspension, or just, you know, failure to thrive in the educational space. So I think it's really important that we emphasize that this is the critical work has to happen upstream of identifying risk factors and getting in and providing direct help. The need is really huge. The scale of crisis that we're seeing right now is really, really significant. And that is a pressure and a challenge. But what we're seeing is that the partnership are working more effectively together to make sure that we know who named children are. We are putting professionals attached into situations wherever possible, and working really closely across professional boundaries.
Thank you. Ruth.
Thank you, Chair. A few things from me. I'd like some reassurance that the partnership working isn't relying on individuals. Some of the comments that were made this morning were around individual people being at panels and meetings. And is this a systematic change that does not rely on individuals being in place? I also want to ask some questions around the document that we had in section 4 about what remains to be done. I'm slightly concerned that some things that feel to me to be very basic and quite easy to achieve haven't happened. So, for example, the staff safety, lone working devices allocated to all staff, that sounds like a really easy thing to do. So I'm surprised that hasn't happened yet. And also around the multi-agency screening tool. So some timelines on when those are going to be delivered. And I suppose
hold it there, because I think that's a good start, because you've picked up section 4, as I've got a question down here about it as well. So the like you indicated, they're outstanding actions. So, but where are they being ranked? Which is the greatest risk? What are we doing about them?
And about individuals, probably Sam or Sarah could answer that.
Yeah, so just for reassurance, it's based on roles, not individuals. So it's very much around who sits in that role, not reliant on if Sarah left tomorrow, for example, that it wouldn't happen. It would be her role. It would be her role as the operations manager for youth justice to, you know, who is accountable for that. So for that reassurance, absolutely. We do understand that sometimes these things get momentum because of professional relationships or personal relationships, but we recognise that that is important in some ways because, well, in a lot of ways, because with those relationships across professions, that's when you know each other, can reach out better, you can get things done, absolutely, but it should never be reliant on us as an individual. And the second bit was around
section 4.
Oh, about
what remains to be done,
the devices and what needs to be done. So with regard to the youth justice plan, I can just give some assurance that the youth justice plan that was in there, the bits that weren't done have been rolled over into our new plan. All our staff have lone working devices now. They just weren't issued. They were ordered but not issued at that point, but now they absolutely all do have them.
but that was just one item of the, if you want to look at the report, section 4 of the report, that's got a list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 items, and rightly so, Ruth identified it, and I've got it down here in big bold, the fact that their actions. So for me, and I'll just put my scrutiny hat on for a second, what's the priority of them? How important is it? Which one of those is the most important? Because my question is a bit more specific. So which of these actions present the greatest risk to children and young people, and that have not, and if not delivered in the next 6 or 12 months, which are going to be the biggest and why?
Some of those actions have now been completed. So obviously point 2, as Sam said, staff safety and access to suitable venues, that has been completed. We took this from the last report, and obviously some things have been completed, but that report hasn't yet been updated. Launching the all age exploitation strategy, that happened at the conference, or is that happening there? That happened at the conference, so that was last week. Identifying education representative on the strategic exploitation group, is that still to be done? Is that in place? We've still got to identify that person. So
if you go through each one, so one of the actions I've written down is it would be helpful to have those bits identified, because one of the things that members, I'm sure that the outcome of this, so our discussion, the questions we've asked, and any recommendations that we would come up for, I'm assuming are going to have to go back to the executive, for the executive to say that we close that circle, have to go back to the audit committee, so that the auditor can do that. So one of the points that I was going to pick up, and I'll make that as a formal recommendation now, that the remaining, what remains to be done is identified, prioritised, and some feedback on it, because it's come to us, and if I was an auditor, I'd look at it and have they closed that bit off yet? And so they haven't. So I think that'll be an action that we'll take away. Ruth, do you want to carry on?
Only had one more, you'll be glad to hear. So in the strategy on section 4, plans for forthcoming years, there is quite a lot in there around SEND related and having a psychologist and development of child friendly spaces. But I haven't seen anything in this report around training around autism specific for staff. There's been nothing in any of the reports. Is that happening? What is happening with that? Because we've had quite a lot of scrutiny in Somerset recently around incidents with young people that are autistic and the way that they've been managed. So what is the plan?
So with regard to the youth justice plan, we've just appointed, she started in December, our full-time clinical psychologist. So she will play a key role in the training of staff around that space. So most children that come into the youth justice system get a full assessment to identify any unmet needs, and from that we can go into specialist assessments, whether that be through our clinical psychologist or a speech and language therapist, to then progress into any neurodiversity pathways. So absolutely, so she will lead on any of that training to give reassurance around that.
Thank you. Henry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. From what I can see, a long time ago in 2007-8, I was the county safety member and was heavily involved in the parenting and the young children situation that was then killed off by the Conservative government. Can't remember its name, brought in by the Labour Party. I am, having been involved by our nursery, you know what I'm talking about, in Castle Carey, and being in a very rural division, it seems to me that we are not picking up the problems of the 2- and 3-year-olds as they come into the nurseries, sorting out the parenting, because the problem, if you don't parent from 0 to 2, you've got problems.
And we go careful where you're going, but
it's time.
Question?
My question is, how is the partnership going to deal with the parenting problem early on?
It's a very big assumption, and I wouldn't want to do being very general there in your, but
yeah. So I think you're talking about Sure Start, Councillor Hophouse. It used to be. It used to be. That has been re-described, shall we say, with the new Labour, the current Labour government, and they're now called family hubs. So they're being brought back in to focus on supporting the widest possible range of parents with parenting from sort of midwifery stage, so before a child is born until they go into reception class. So it's about parenting, it's about making sure that parents are playing with children, that they're communicating with children, so that when children go into school and reception, they're in the best possible place to be able to learn. That is being launched at the moment nationally, and in Somerset we had to identify our first family hub. We've identified the first one in Wellington, using the community hub that Wellington have, and then it will be expanded across the county over the next 6 to 12 months.
I was going to say with I was going to signpost you also to obviously family hubs and our Best Start for Life protocol that we have as a council, and I didn't want to steal all the thunder, but I think it's one of our committee looked at it at the last meeting, and I believe that we have it coming back to us again.
My concern is the rural areas, because without being rude to the police, we don't have those. We are very
Henry, I apologise. Please forgive me. I don't mean, I'm not cutting you off. I promise you that that rurality is very much high on the radar of the family hubs and best because of that, and without being too, I spoke at a national meeting specifically on that subject only a couple of weeks ago. So we're there. I've got two hands behind you. So there's Amelia got in before you, Lisa. So I'll bring Amelia in and then Lisa.
I just wanted to, and I'm sure this was touched on at the last meeting, but just remind people of the jointly commissioned forest programme, which is delivered by Public Health. Very, very strong programme, which is targeted, very much targeted at the families most in need of support in those earliest ages. And health visiting obviously is a universal service and is able to target based on their interaction with children at young ages. Our good level of development in the early years is quite good. That's one of our strongest areas in education. And as it happens, our national target is higher than in other areas. So this is an area where we have good, strong partnership working. As Councillor Redmond indicated, we can do better, we will do better, and our targets are to be above national. But we do have targeted programmes, and I would say one of the things about the early years system is that it does include rural areas. There are nurseries, preschools, and provision in every single part of the county, and our reach does touch every corner.
I'm just trying to bring it because we're starting to veer off a little bit. Lisa, thank you.
So just to the family's first pilot in Yeovil, whilst it's not the family hub, it's the family first pilot, does have a very good representation of experts in the policing field dealing with children, and we've also put in a local beat manager into that early pilot so that we can make sure that policing is very much part of the early years conversations right the way through. And I put my hand up around, I just have to challenge the conversation that says we're not in the rural areas. We are. I'd be interested to understand why that's not felt, but not in this meeting.
Thank you. Okay, Marcus, Councillor Cravis.
Thank you, Chair. Well, when I read this in the agenda, because I was quite interested in this, I think last time, was it Dean House we talked about this, I think, and I found it quite interesting then. I have to say, though, that I feel so out of my depth after hearing the presentation and everything else. I'm thinking how far, what possible scrutiny or input can I give? Although the only thing I did think was there seems to be an awful lot of panels and boards and partnerships. And it was a bit, you sometimes, without wanting to sound like Victor Meldrew, and I'm not quite that old yet, but I'm getting grumpier. You do sometimes think that's an awful lot of panels and boards. But I did have a couple of questions, I think, was, there was one, I think it's on page, I've written down the page number, it was inconsistency in education access. I didn't quite understand how that was meant, because obviously I think I mentioned it before, that there's maybe an inconsistency in school quality of schools, depending on where you're located, and this could be a bit of a postcode lottery on the quality of the school you're at. But then that led me into a big vicious thing, thinking about youth services. Youth services, is that the right word? What used to be youth clubs. And I remember I was at a meeting the other day where I think it was Minehead Eye who do something without being parochial, we're asking a parish council for some money. And I'm thinking, how are we at that point where someone who's providing a service that actually could link into this is having to go hand in cap to parish councils for a couple of grand a year so they can do a youth club in their village? And it's like, how have we got to that stage? And actually, is also half the problem then actually the lack of funding in schools. So does this all go back to 2010? And the lack of funding in schools generally, I don't think I'm speaking of, I think that's probably generally accepted. And is that all a big circle? There was another one. One question was about the inconsistent education access, how that went. The other one was, we talked about, and I think Francis picked this up, but what we haven't got an answer for is, what is actually the cause of the worst violence? If it's not sexual exploitation, what is the cause of that? I suspect we don't know the answer. It's probably drugs, but is that just a myth, or is it other factors in play? And I think, Yeah, and I think it's also, well, it's a scrutiny meeting where I can have a go at the judiciary. I thought that was quite an interesting comment, is why we're doing all this work and we're trying to be preventative of everything else. And then at the last minute, the judiciary let us down at the last minute. How can we as a scrutiny committee in Somerset have an effect on that? And I don't know how we can have an effect on that. And I think, and the only other thing was, you could think, you brought it up, Chair, was this is so important, but at the same time, where's the political accountability? Is that coming from national? But then, and I'm sure there's a lot of experts in the field, and everybody knows. As I said, I'm totally out of my depth. But where's the political decision making in all this, or is it all down to a wonderful portfolio holder, or should be other things? And where is somewhere along the line the buck must stop with someone politically, and who is that?
So before you answer those questions, I'll jump in first. I'll do the last one first. I have already written down oversight ? The question I was going to ask Heather was, where is the oversight? And I go back to my comment about what I think Grant Thornton were looking at. They identified children and families scrutiny for this council because it is the member-led bit whose job it is to delve into to ask these questions. And I think we're going to have a conversation at some point about how this is monitored, because I rightly so, I picked up, you look at section 5 of the report that comes to us, there's lots of people with lots of responsibilities there, but no indication of who's actually going to be holding them to account, what's the timescale against them meeting those where and it then goes to where can we demonstrate a young person's life has been made better because of what the conversations that we've had? I think I sort of answered the last bit first, but do you want to come back on the other? I see Amelia's got her hand up, so she might come in with the education stuff.
So if you look, Nash, I'm just going to touch on the question of where funding has predominantly been an issue. I think what the overall picture suggests is that the pinch around funding has not predominantly been in statutory delivery. That has always been funded, and the core business of schools has been funded. What has come under extraordinary pressure, both at school level, in the local authority, and our partners, has been the non-statutory things that keep the system together, the things that enable those extra projects, those targeted things in particular areas, those things that make the system move, that bring people together, and that put something in place where something has cropped up in a time of a crisis or when there is a pressure. So it's the in-between things that are very difficult to defend. Those are the things that have increasingly been stripped out of the system. So it's the cushioning, it's the extras, it's the things that come in a crisis. And so I think that can be very, very difficult to identify. But what you find is the system becomes less resilient because anything that needs something a little bit different or a little bit extra, there is no support for it. So perhaps that's partly what you were reflecting in your question.
Heather?
Hi, thank you. Yeah, just reflecting on the accountability. I mean, obviously, in terms of where we fit with our kind of our picture of boards, of the many boards, of course, a lot of this work will go back to the Safer Somerset Partnership, and that they have the strategic kind of statutory responsibility for holding our response for serious violence, for exploitation, for the prevent work, all of those big ticket items that we don't want to have to think about, and luckily only affect a few people, thankfully, or hopefully, in some respects, but they affect them badly. That sits with the Safer Somerset Board, Safer Somerset Partnership. But what I'm also hearing is a desire in a way for, certainly with regard to this organisation, don't forget we're talking about a partnership. So I'm sure health and police and our other colleagues might want to have their own way of having their stakeholders look at this. But for us in Somerset Council, I think if you've already asked for this to come here, I think it would be sensible. Well, and Audit has, and I think if Audit hadn't, you probably would anyway. So I think bringing it back here for that next level of what's happened. So what's next? So what's next? What's the timetable? How soon do we get to not just putting something in place, but being embedded? Because that can take a lot longer. You can put all the initiatives in the world, but if we can't demonstrate the embedded, we can't see impact reports. We can't, and some are referenced obviously on the strategy, and we can do case studies, which at least you've seen at least one today. So I think if we can bring this back, and then I think if there becomes a more kind of cohesive way of making sure it gets back to executive. And I think also whatever goes to executive should probably also go to audit because they've asked you to look at it. So I think, I think there's, and I don't want it to go everywhere because it would go boarditis again, but, be assured that the Safer Somerset Partnership will be holding this part of the system to account for making all of these things happen because we have to. But I think you lean into scrutiny because you're obviously interested in it's good for you to do it. And then we can take it back to executive to make sure we then listen to what you say.
Thank you. Lisa?
I think I'm going to see Heather cringe on the screen, but I think that to Marcus's point about complexity of boards and panels, I couldn't agree more. It's something we've escalated as a partnership, a leadership team. In terms of those front-facing child-centric panels, I think the model that we've proposed and is now beginning to work really well does have complexities and volume, but necessarily so. In terms of the governance and the oversight of where we come together as senior strategic leads in themes, there is not the join up in Somerset that there should be. It's a drum that we are banging. I think that the investment in terms of making it efficient and making sure that the learning goes into one place where it's complex, because that lots of us are on the set are on panels that all overlap subject areas, and the delivery against some of it could be more efficient if the board structure was more efficient. And this is something that we're trying really hard to work on, and it's never going to be fast enough.
Thank you. I appreciate that and that response. So I think it's one of the I've written down partnership working and board structure and committee, and it goes back, I think, to the member oversight. How can we help and make it better? And what next will be the thing that we do. Alistair.
Thank you. Burnham on Sea and Highbridge, Alistair Hendry. Question for the lady at the back there. I think is your name Sarah? Yes, Sarah. Okay, thank you. Actually, I'll keep it quick. Two very short questions. The FFD front door policy. Could you expand on that for the purpose and benefit? First question. Second one, much more important. 800 missing children, teenagers, whatever the case may be. And you said, and I quote, it could be missing for up to 72 hours, 3 days, thereabouts, okay? If you have a child, whatever age really, but under the age of, say, 16 or something, if they've been held against their will for 2 or 3 days, wouldn't that kind of throw a hand grenade in the mix? Because you can't keep somebody against their will. So where are they been? Where have they been for up to 72 hours? Thank you.
So FFD is our family front door. So the early help hub and the first response triage. So when early help assessments come into our front door for children's services, they're the team that review those risks and signpost them to the right service in the local authority. So all of those processes are mapped around whether it goes to children with disabilities, whether it goes to an assessment team, geographical mapping, whether it comes and is triaged to be at complex or earlier help level when it comes to the prevention service, so family intervention service. Does that clarify that point? In relation to our missing children, the 72 hours refers to our timescale to give them a return home interview after they've been found. So most of our children who go missing are found within 12 hours of being reported by their parent and or carer. And the 72 hours is the timescale with which our independent staff will contact those children to offer them a return home chat. So now you've been found, what is it that happened? Is there anything that you need to know? And the statutory guidance, the national guidance around missing children is that should be done by an independent person to ensure that if it's something at home or something their school is doing, that they've got somebody separate and independent they can share that information with. Children that are missing for 24 hours, it's a statutory duty to call a strategy discussion for those. So all significant harm safeguarding processes would then come into action if they were missing for 24 hours, which is very small numbers of those 800 children. Does that reassure you? Thank you.
Thank you. Lisa?
I was just going to help there with the clarity as well. We categorise our children who are missing as high risk, and they would be reviewed by detectives, and there would be all sorts of activity. Anybody that potentially has an adult who's potentially manipulated a child to be with them, even though they think they're voluntarily with them. We've got all sorts of procedures and legislation. We've got child abduction notices that we can serve on those adults, and that becomes easier for us to deal with the adults that might be committing offences. But the children that are going missing for more than 24 hours are doing so not necessarily with an adult that's perpetrating harm against them. It will be for all sorts of reasons. But yeah, if there was any indication of abduction, that invokes a much different police response, which is immediate.
Okay, members, everyone's indicated they wanted to speak, has already spoken. Francis wants to come back, but what I would say, we've been going for an hour and 50 minutes, which I think is good in giving it the right level of attention and the right questioning and everything. So that's not a complaint, just a statement where we are. I just looking to round up in a minute so they give you a chance to have a break and then come back for the second shorter session, I hope. Famous last words. Francis, if you could be concise, I'd appreciate it.
Very briefly, to say that it is, I think, important for us to recognise that no matter how perfect, and none of us are perfect, the parenting of a child is, things can go wrong. There are people who will exploit children. And it's not all about what happened when they were little and how their parents are. And we need to recognise there is, while we know that there's lots of danger within families at times, there is also danger from outside. And it is terribly easy to feel that it's all the parents' fault and then not think about it anymore.
Yes. So I was going to say thank you very much, everyone, for the report, and I think the report has been really it has highlighted a number of issues and concerns which I think we'll try and cover in my summary. But I just wanted to, in the first instance, so Grant Thornton were quite clear, and they said that the council should provide the Children and Family Scrutiny Committee with an update to the progress made by the council and key partners in driving forward the required improvement identified by the JTI and the HMIP inspection, and specifically around that. And I think, as I say, my gut tells me that they wanted this member oversight so that we could then understand where it is. There's the go on.
I think just in response to that, Councillor, I was here in the summer of last year reporting on the HMIP and the Youth Justice Plan, and as I said then, we absolutely welcome any member of Scrutiny to come along to any of our services and offer and have those updates live, but we're more than happy to be called back to provide those updates at any time.
Yes, and I think for me, the one thing that's come out of this is the need for us to have a report of some sort, so that we can then, hopefully, from a different perspective, drill down into the bits. I welcome the invite for anyone to go out, and I keep saying that. But the problem we have as members, sometimes we don't necessarily know who to reach out to and about what until afterwards. Looking back, hindsight for us as members is a wonderful thing. It does solve the problems. But just for clarity, so the report that we've had has come and has identified this and give us an update as members of where we have. We've drilled down and we've asked questions about different things. There are a number of points that we've highlighted, which I know that will be picked up in the minutes. But for me, I think the first outcome, and I think the recommendation from us will be that we appreciate the work. So I'm giving us we're going to be making recommendations to executive. That's the only route that we have, or in effect to Heather to be able to feed back. So as a committee, we appreciate the work that's gone into moving us forward to this. We would recognise the fact that there are still some issues around partnership working, and with that, it's the number of boards and different reporting streams that are going in, and I think Lisa identified the fact that the board structures is something that we're looking at. So the first thing we'd ask is for an update at some point on the board structure, how it's been streamlined and made more efficient, effective, or whatever like that. And the committee would add our weight to the fact that we, in our limited knowledge, look at it and can see the complexity of it. So any benefits that way that we could do. What we would also ask is for the points in section 4 that that talk about what remains to be done be, I suppose, revisited, clarified, and prioritised to with some feedback. Section 4, and then there will that goes to the complexity of the bit, because section 5 it talks about the in the first instance the strategic groups and all the different groups of dates, but then it talks about the objectives and priorities. So similarly, we would hope that those are prioritised and fed back in with an indication of a timeline. We can't hold someone to account if the thing doesn't have to be done for 2.5 years. So it's that element as well. And for me, I'd like a bit of clarity around oversight. What as a scrutiny committee, what can we do to help with the process as well? So it's not clear to me who's looking over whose shoulder and who's then responsible for that. And that goes with the partnership stuff as well as the locally. Again, I'll repeat it. A lot of work has been done, a lot of progress has been made, but we hopefully with our help could make it better. And I suppose the timeline for when that might be, I would suggest 3 months be a reasonable timeline, but I'll finish off our recommendations by saying, Heather, what do you think? What, executive, what do you want us to do? I think, is there anything else that I need, members? We'll summarise it afterwards and make sure that circulated that everyone's happy for. Was someone looking to come in? No. Okay. Members, are we happy with the I won't read them back. We'll try and summarise them based on the minutes, etc. But before I go, so Claire, Heather, Jane, ladies, is there anything that you think we could, Sarah, as you're still with us, what can we do? What would you ask us to do if we could help? Is there something we can do? So in our recommendations, do we need to make something stronger? Is it clearer to the partners? Do we need to amplify the partnership working concerns, the partners?
They're conferring, which is great, because that's the idea. It wasn't a no conferring round. I don't think that there's anything that we need you to do especially, but I do genuinely think it'd be really useful for you to, to continue it with an oversight role. I have had whispered in my ear, of course, that the recent inspection is due to come back here anyway. The update was going to come back in June anyway, but I think perhaps if we could regroup in the next sort of 3 months and just work out where our timetables are and our progress is across those things, and then we can come back. And then you might think that whenever you receive that, you might think actually we could maybe push back, push the other one back further or bring it forward. If we could make a suggestion that we'd undertake to bring something back on those sections 4 and 5, particularly, and the board, and come back with a proposal for you.
Jane,
how'd that be?
Yeah, we would just like to extend an invite to you, Chair, or any other members to the YJ Development Day on the 17th of March, where we'll be looking at the priorities, ready to submit the plan in June. So scrutiny involvement in that day would be welcomed.
What date was that? Sorry. Yours
17th of March.
Yeah.
We'll send the details to you.
Okay, that's thank you for that. Any other points, issues, members? Okay, so it's call it 4 o'clock. Back ready to start 1:15, please. Sarah, thank you for joining us. Appreciate your time. And again, if you could think, if there's anything you ever need, please feel free to drop me a line. If you need someone juggling along a little bit to help you do your job better, then let me know. Thank you anyway.
That's much appreciated. Thank you, Lee.
Okay, 10 and a bit minutes, members. Okay, members, thank you very much. I know that there are a couple have left us and a couple are otherwise engaged, but I'm just conscious of time on a Thursday afternoon. So we are restarting at 1616 with agenda item 7, which is our deficit management plan. I gave a bit of a conversation at the beginning of this, and those of you that are observant or attend executive will know that there was an announcement on Monday which affected our finances a little bit differently, but not necessarily the deficit management plan. So I'll draw your attention to the recommendations as set out on page 89 for this one, and I hand over to Heather to do the introduction.
Hi, thank you very much. I'm a lot happier now. I've got a cup of coffee. Thank you. That break was needed. Yes, indeed. While we're still waiting for things like the white paper for special education needs and disabilities reform, we're still waiting for that. All the things get trailed, we still don't know. The government has, as part of its government settlement or its settlement to us local authorities, it has given us an announcement about the accumulating deficit on the high needs block element of the dedicated schools grant. You know, that's been something we've been trailing for some time. We're in the middle of a pack of a number of local authorities who are building up a sizable deficit because the money that is passported to us from the government to meet what they think we need to spend on high needs and what our children need in that high needs cohort is outstripped by the number of children who are presenting with additional needs, and also by the cost of meeting those needs. So we are like many of just creating this deficit. And they've been talking about lots of things. We've had the statutory override, so we haven't had to crystallise it. If we can cover it in cash, we just don't have to put it on the books. That's been in place and is still in place until the end of March 28. But what they've now said is they've made a decision that actually for all of those local authorities with a deficit, an accumulative deficit, they will write off or take on whatever they do with it. They'll take off our hands 90% of that deficit, just on the high needs block, just that one as at March 26. They'll do that probably later in the autumn on successful receipt and sign off of a SEND reform plan. We're still not entirely sure. We're still hearing what that should look like, what the criteria for success might be. We still don't quite know how we're going to be judged entirely, but hopefully later in the autumn that would happen. That is a help for us in two ways. One is as a local authority, we're not having to borrow or do anything. Luckily, we're covering that with cash balances. That couldn't go on for long, but it means that amount of money that is used to pay for that gap, we could put into other services, or we could put it back in the bank and get some interest on it. So it will have a positive financial effect on us if they do take 90% of that debt away. However, and it's great, that's fantastic, but we still have to understand that our current system means that we will still continue to spend more than we actually get in. So we don't want it to continue. We'd have to also be able to cope with the 10% that has not been taken away, which is about 11.7 million, as I understand it. That's what the 10% would be. So it's still quite a lot of money. And I think the thing is, rather like when the statutory override was extended, people went, oh, that's good. You couldn't take your foot off the gas because it's still as worrying now as it was before. And in fact, it really makes us think that actually we've only got about a year. So all of the work on the DMP, all of the work on the DMP, all of the ambitions of the DMP, we have to do at pace. And there have been some certain elements of it that have been, let's say, slow to get started. And that's principally, I think, because there's been quite a keen check on business cases and making sure that any savings are actually validated. And all of that, we have to do that quicker going forward, and we have to get things in place going forward. So I suppose the watchword is that it might feel like a great thing, and it is a bit of a, it's helpful, but we can't sleep at nights until we've got a deficit management plan that's up and running, and our children are getting better services, and we're actually doing what we're here to do. So it's good. It is good, but I'm going to be leaning on I'm particularly keen actually, and leaning on the member oversight of the DMP that is being offered by yourselves in Scrutiny, because that would be really helpful for me to know we're doing the right thing and to demonstrate it's not just a case of the numbers, it's also a case of the quality of the actions that are being taken and how far we're getting. Pass over to Claire now, if I may.
Yeah. So you have the report in front of you. It is quite a long report. What we intended to do today was to just go through the governance diagram so that scrutiny members could understand their role in overseeing the deficit management plan and the progress on that. I was going to hand over to Rowan, who is our interim programme manager, who has been a key person in putting together this whole process and the terms of reference for that standing panel and the overall governance, just to explain that diagram to you and how the DMP standing panel sitting with this committee would work. Thanks, Rowan.
Thank you, Chair and members, and good afternoon. So yes, I'm Rowan Griffin, interim SEND programme lead here, and thank you for inviting me to present today. So with reference to the paper, and I'll briefly outline what's been proposed in terms of strength and governance and why this is needed to deliver the DMP, but also, you know, throughout this whole presentation, talk about why this is important in supporting children and young people with SEND in Somerset. So first of all, why do we need strength and governance? For background, as members know, Somerset faces a significant and escalating dedicated schools grant high needs deficit. Therefore, full council approved the DMP at full council in September on 2025. And if you look at the report, please see page 93 for a summary of the projects in the interventions plan. That's the it's like an egg diagram, which it just identifies the different things that we're planning to do, which we are doing. We have working groups in place to try and mitigate the costs rising further in future years. And you can see there what it is and the anticipated amount that has been agreed to be achieved. So the intention of the DMP is to mitigate future growth, projected to rise to 129 million by March 2028 if the plan is delivered in full. However, the Q3 forecasting indicated that already deteriorated to 194 million by March 2028, and this is because of demand pressures and delays in delivering some interventions. But resources now in place. There is myself. There is a project team with clear project discipline and planning around this. We have working groups, etc., and all of these things will help it deliver. But we do need to confirm governance, how this is overseen, and how decisions and changes are made. So what we're proposing, please see pages 94 to 95 of the report, and as Claire mentioned, chart 2. So the first thing we're proposing is a new DMP member standing panel. So this would be quarterly from April 2026. It would be small scale. We've penciled in April the 14th for the first meeting, and then mid-July, mid-October, etc. And this would be a small scale group, membership to be confirmed, to be chaired by Councillor Shearer. So this would enable member-led oversight, deep dives and scrutiny of delivery and financial risk. And it would report to this scrutiny committee at least every 6 months, and by exception to the executive. So it would provide scrutiny with capacity to explore and really look into the DMP, and it would also receive the latest officer updates on how progress is going with the DMP as well. So that's the member side. And then on the officer side, this is just to note, but it is very important that we have very clear governance at the officer level as well. A strengthened officer-led. It's mentioned on the diagram as program board. I think we're going to change it to project delivery board, just so that it's not confused with the Children's Transformation Programme. Semantics, but it's probably important just for presentation. So this has been established, and it's to meet monthly from March 2026, March the 3rd. It's chaired by the Service Director for Education with finance present. The Section 151 officer attends and finance colleagues as well. And it's responsible for operational delivery, monitoring and escalation of issues. And it's at this place where someone like me will ensure that there is project management discipline around it, that we have regular highlight reports and tracking and monitoring and all of these things. And there's quite a bit of detail, but it's really important that we have that discipline so that we can make sure that we achieve what we have agreed to achieve, and that where challenges arise, that we escalate that elsewhere. And it reports to to both the Children's Transformation Board and also the new member standing panel that we have proposed. So it also clarifies, importantly, financial decision making, and our financial colleagues were equally very keen on this paper going and this approval of a governance process, and this is what we do when changes and new investments are made. We have agreed some very high financial targets for a number of these projects. It may be that as we go into them that some of those things change. So if that happens, then we have to go through some processes which are outlined in the paper. And for example, where it's transformation funding, capital receipts, then those proposals would be business cases going through on the left through the Transformation Board and Inspiring Innovation Board. And where it's other kinds of funding, then that would be for the Section 151 officer decision at the monthly Finance Oversight Board for Education. So it sounds very simple actually describing it that way, but it hasn't been. So that this paper hopefully really helps clarify that, and officers know where to go for certain different decisions. And it will ensure a clear golden thread from operational delivery through to member oversight and executive approval where required. So it will help us get a stronger grip on cost mitigation projects. It will allow clear roles and responsibilities with it amongst officers, but also of the member oversight. It will also ensure timely escalation of risk and change requests to finance, executive and scrutiny. And it will also ensure transparent reporting across the whole system and alignment with national reforms when they come. Just to note, as colleagues have already on the recent developments, so this will, whilst there is this up to 90% of historical DSG deficits being overwritten in the future, and this is a pledge, this will be conditional on ongoing and strong future financial management, a high quality SEND improvement plan and maturity assessment, and also demonstrably effective partnership working with the Department for Education and its advisors. They will be looking for us to show we are managing this, we know what we're doing, and we're making headway. So all this is what this plans to do. Of course, we need to await the education white paper, which may include additional impacts as well. So in summary, members, even with the recent government announcements, strengthened governance remains critical to ensure Somerset delivers the DMP with the required pace, grip and transparency needed with the ambition that we have set. And this is vital to ensure the best local services for children with SEND and their families, and to ensure the financial sustainability of the budget and wider council. So thank you very much. And if you've got any questions, happy to answer them.
Thank you, Rowan. I'll start. Thank you for the report. It was rather long, and so just to remind everyone of how this came about. One of the things that you make reference in your report to the fact that the Scrutiny Committee in August made 5 recommendations to the executive, but you didn't include the 5 recommendations. But the main body behind the recommendations was the fact that this committee recognised the size of the work that would be required to provide the necessary oversight. And one of the things that the committee were clear about was the fact they turned around and said, we ain't got the time or the backroom support to fill that gap. So that was the first one. Secondly, what we said was that we as a committee, although we would welcome the reports, may not be best placed or the most knowledgeable to be able to be part of that body, which is where the standing and I'm looking at page 103 now. I was trying to find who officers thought would be members of that standing body, and I've got, yes, you are mentioned there, Heather. Go on.
No, I don't want to jump in on you, but I mean, certainly I'm pleased. Thank you for taking us right back to where this started from, because I think what has happened is this particular report is brilliantly done, gives you a whole gamut of all of the governance around, or the proposed governance around the DMP. But the most important bit were the two pale blue lozenges in the middle of that diagram, which was the DMP panel and up to scrutiny, because that's the bit that really I want you guys to be most bothered about. And definitely that's the thing. And the other one is that, which I think is a bit of a misunderstanding, and I was not going to stop the papers to put, I'd rather put it right in the room. That little gang, I keep thinking like a little gang of members who are really interested in getting under the skin of the DMP. They should be the ones I'm hoping will do all of the work. I don't mind being a sponsor, which makes sure you get the right information that you need, or you get the resources to support you in your work. But that's not really my gig, really. It's not mine. But I'll keep an eye, and I'll do that to keep it going. But I didn't want you to think it was a takeover by the lead member to scrutinise my own homework, which would be madness. And you're right, that one page, you picked out the page 103, where I was going, that's the only bit that matters, and it needs your input to help us get it exactly right, so that it works right.
Okay, so the question was, whom and who do we think will be the members assigned to that? Now, I envisage a shout, a call for action. So we have this body, and I'd suggest that if we did put a call for action, keep it short, because the longer the request, the less likely members are to because I think there needs to be an interest for someone with an interest in finance. There needs to be an interest for someone with an interest in children and young people specifically, and there needs to be an education input into it in the first, because there are going to be different people looking at different things. And one of the other bit of the recommendation, which I think is important, is that body is also part of the policy development. And I've used it before, but I'll just say it out loud for committee members. At the moment, we're making a lot of changes to the way that we do things within for children and young people with special education needs and disabilities. And the likelihood is that after the white paper, we might have to do a few more. My concern is this committee may just be able to look at it, but we haven't got the time to be able to look. If that little bite there, that little bite there, suddenly creates a big hole without us seeing it, that's what the oversight rationale was behind the committee. And so question one for me, who's going to be the members and how are we going to get them? The reason I say that, because when you go on to the bottom of page 104, you're potentially talking about the first meeting of that body on the 14th of April. And you're then saying that they're going to report into the 18th of May's scrutiny meeting. And I don't think that it may be achievable. I don't want to be putting it, but the time scale with that, the timeline is wrong as well. First thought, sorry.
So I think I'd say that in terms of members of that panel, what we're not looking today to identify members of that panel. We're just looking to say, this is the structure of that panel. This is what we think it needs to look like. Heather's agreed to sponsor it. And we would be going out to democratic services to all members to say, these are the terms of reference. If this committee agrees them, who would want to be part of this panel? And this is the skill set we're looking for in terms of members' skill set to be able to be part of that group. So that will be the way it will work. I think it will be possible to report from the April 1st meeting to scrutiny in May. We're not going to be saying very much. We're probably going to be saying, these are the people who are sitting on this group. This is the work we intend to do with them. And this is the timeline for what we expect that group to be doing. But I think it's really important that this committee have a really close understanding of how quickly or slowly that process is going. And, what if we don't get enough volunteers? What if we don't get those people? You need to be aware of that. And we need to have a conversation about how that might work in the future.
Perfect, thank you. So just to give you a bit of help, at the last week at the scrutiny chairs meeting, and vice chairs, I already pre-advertised the fact that this will be coming along, because I wanted to be clear, because we've got the audit committee are represented there and our finance and resource committee are represented there. So that would be an ideal opportunity to do it. And I will repeat the fact when it comes out, the request comes out for that. But yeah, okay, so we've dealt with that. So Francis.
you, Mr. Chairman. I very much welcome this. I think it's hugely important to have member input, member interest, and member understanding, and spreading understanding among members. I think is enormously helpful, because that is an opportunity also to spread it wider in outside this council, and I think that's important too, because there are a lot of people who really ought to understand what's going on. The point of what we're doing is to do the right things for children. And to do that, we've absolutely got to get the money right. But the point is about doing things, the right things for children. I went straight to pages 103 and 104 and asked the same questions as Lee, of course. But I also looked at I read the report, heard the presentation, did see that we do get at the end, we've got to do right things for children. But the focus of this of the paper is unsurprisingly hugely financial. But I'm worried about the core membership of this, and there doesn't seem to be much here for education or for children. The officer support has the chief finance officer, and an education finance person, and yes, we have our head of services and improvement. We've got our assistant director, service director education. Where's the DCS in this, and where is the real emphasis on getting things right for children? I am a bit concerned that this is about other people telling children's services what they can and can't spend, rather than starting with the point is to do the right things for children.
Thank you. If I may, I couldn't agree more, because don't forget there's another whole stream of assurance going on the DMP officer led on the finance side. So, yeah. Oh yeah. No, is what I'm saying. So I can see it there, and I think you're right. There's something. I was trying. I went out to the local government advisor. I went out to other lead members to see how other people are doing this and how best to do it properly. And I think what I'm thinking of is what I would like to see this doing is the output from that DMP delivery board, which is like this is the program. Here's the 7 things that we're doing. This is how we're getting on. But maybe this is how we think we're going to do something. That stuff that already is going to exist comes to this gang of 4 or 5 members, and they can look through that and they start asking the questions they want. So the people who then support them are the people who need to support according to the questions they're being asked. It should be, if there's push and pull, it should be being pushed by you, not received. We're not pushing it at you. You should be pushing it at us. So I think if we can make that work, I think that would be more useful. I mean, I realise everyone's time's precious, and I know no one's got enough time. And this next year is going to be awful. I mean, without a shadow of a doubt, this is going to be it gets worse every year. This is going to be one of the worst ones for time and effort. But I think if we can get that where you drive the questions.
Already made a note to say that as far as the terms of reference is concerned, to give the body the autonomy and the ability that they need, I'm confident we can agree the main body of the context today, but that one of the bits I was already going to recommend was the fact that we then defer to that body to finalise at their first meeting, because there's going to be stuff that we miss. So.
I'll try. Promise, I'll try. In order to get control of the money and in order to do the right things for children, that has to be the focus. That I think must include possibly questions which members are not operational, but members I think should be aware of what the operational challenges of doing the right things for children are, and whether the changes that are being brought in for children are doing what they need to do. And that's why I feel that we need to have a really strong children part to this.
I totally get, and hope, no, I believe that we will make that's what this body will bring. But so I don't want to. No, but let's get them in place first. See, we have the volunteers, and because their first report back to us is going to be, have they looked at it? And more to the point, I think, is that they're going to be able to take the feedback from the other officer bodies and look at it as well. Because you're right, this is a massive thing that we need to have some oversight on, and hopefully that's what it will be, and to bring it together. So the work that the officers are doing, all their different bodies, and hopefully, you know, things like for me, the first thing I will say to the members of this committee is finance is going to be the one you need to be looking at, because they're the ones that on a day-to-day basis look at the numbers, and if they're concerned, then that's what you feed in and do it that way. So yeah, thank you for making the point, Francis. Ruth.
I'm sort of with Francis on this one, obviously. Looking at the lovely little diagram you got, your little circle, just one small thing that I'd point out on this, which is really looking at the governance structure. I appreciate this is a council responsibility. However, where are partners? Because in reality, this is not just it's an education, health and care plan, not an education plan. And actually the other partners in this are really important. I can't see them in any of this governance structure about how they're going to play their part to support in bringing the budget down, in effect. And they're going to be really key on some of these areas. Some of the messages, for example, that come out of our health partners don't necessarily help with some of the conversations, and I just wonder about how are we bringing them into this to make sure that we've got that shared partnership, appreciating it sits with the council, but they do have their bit to play.
Amelia, I've got your hands, but I'll bring Rowan in first, and then I'll bring you in.
So this is part of this will be reporting to the SEN partnership, but first of all, so it will also be point for information there. In terms of our planning, and the steer from DFE is also that we need to be doing this in the context of wider SEN improvement, involving the parent care forum, involving children, young people, involving partners. It's one part of an improvement journey and agreeing a SEN improvement plan. So we will be trying to do that in parallel with this. But in this particular paper, we focused in on the DMP and the financial things. But all of that is also on the radar, and we are doing. But that's just my view on it. Amelia, you might want to say something further.
Amelia.
Yeah, so you know, because you've been an integral part of it, Ruth, but what underpins this work is the SEND action plan, and the SEND action plan is absolutely a multi-agency plan. The elements that have a financial ramification specifically for the high needs budget are council specific, and some of those get quite granular, and there's a limit to the tolerance of our partners to go into the detail of council financial management and some of our operational processes. But it's absolutely not the intention that this be a siloed conversation, because all of the enablers, all of the joint working, a lot of the financial interconnections, but very much the child at the centre, is about that multi-agency relationship. So conversations about strengthening the partnership board, making an improvement board, that is all about making sure that those conversations do happen. So they should be seen together. I think what we're just trying to get right, we might need to refine as we go, as we learn from it, is to not spend too much time in an individual meeting on things that people don't feel are relevant to them, but have complementary meetings, one where we're very much focused on the multi-agency space and those interconnection with that improvement hat on, and another which is more the ins and outs of specifically of the financial workings for the council in terms of the programme board. The member space, we'd expect those things to come together, and the members would have broad, interests across any dimension that we were doing, and potentially wanting to bring partners into that conversation there. And I think that's the strength of that kind of member oversight, is that those operational groups for the officers, then members then have free rein to take that in whichever direction they wish.
Claire?
Yeah, so this is clearly a finance paper, really. It's about the finances. and trying to reduce the deficit. There is, of course, that the 151's officers' key sense of being, should we say, is about reducing deficit and making sure that the council is financially viable. Obviously, as the DCS, my focus is making sure children have the right support and services, preferably within the allocated budget. So there is obviously some tension between those two things sometimes, and that's just natural. That's the way it works. Yeah. So I think if you see this paper as the financial perspective on the work that needs to be done, there are lots of elements in these DMP projects, as Amelia said, that are about improving outcomes for children. So the SEND units is about trying to keep local children in their local school, with their friends, in their local environment. That's one of the pillars in terms of mainstream school being the right option for most children of the transformation programme in children's. Increasing the number of special school places. Again, that's about a good quality education for children who need a special school place in their local environment, where they probably can go to a school more local to home than if they're in an INMS school that could be anywhere in the county. Supported internships is again about making sure that young people have the opportunity to enter that world of work in a supportive way and hopefully to get employment. So from my perspective, those are things that are actually improving outcomes for children. From the finance directors and the finance team's perspective, those are things that might reduce cost. So I think we're all focusing on the same things, but from different perspectives. And sometimes they don't look as though we're working together to get the right outcomes for children and to get the finance right, because we're putting together papers and looking at things in different ways. But the SEND Partnership Board is the way in which we expect the outcomes for children bit to be monitored for this, and the DMP panel is how we expect both the finance, and as Amelia said, and the outcomes for children to be monitored together. So there's the DMP Progress Board and the Finance, I can't remember what it's called now, Finance Oversight Board will look at the finance. Well, the DMP Programme Board will look at both the finance and the outcomes for children. Oversight Board for Finance will look at just the finances, and the SEND Partnership Board will be looking at, are we getting the right outcomes for children, but within the relevant budget. So we're trying to balance it across the system, but we do recognise there are some meetings that need to focus just on finance and some that need to focus more on outcomes for children.
And I think to just add on to that, part of the rationale behind the member panel was that the members can ask questions that some officers may not necessarily ask. That was to bring that into the room as well. Okay. Any other questions? So just for starters then, Rowan, so I would recommend that we change the DMP standing panel's name to the DMP member standing panel, because that then would be a little bit clearer and help people in the understand what it is, because it looks like it's part of the process. I think that there've been no negative comments in relation to the terms of reference, but what I will say, we support the terms of reference subject to confirmation by the body at their first meeting. That way it then gives them the opportunity to make any changes in theirs as well. Just for the sake of the minutes, we note the fact that we've identified that this shouldn't just be we should be involving partners as much as possible in this. However, as Claire has indicated, there are different bodies for doing that, and that should be the thing. Also, that once we agree today, then you'll work with Democratic Services to go out to members to express of interest. What I will say is, I would hope that we may be able to, because this committee consists of co-opted members as well as members of council, that we may want to consider including co-opted members. Depends how many responses we get back and who it is. But I think that our co-opted members have a knowledge and experience that can bring a different flavour to the feedback for it. And finally, I think the point that has to be made, despite the announcement made on Monday in relation to the finances, I don't the urgency or the importance of the DMP hasn't changed from Friday to today. It's still as important now as it was before this announcement. It just means that the money, the impact the council would has financial impact is being mitigated slightly. However, as has already been made clear, and for those of you that haven't read the paper or the announcement, there are lots of caveats attached to it, and it wasn't clear. It talked about the finances at the end of this financial year, but there's no safety net until 2028. So there was concerns about the bit in between, but again, that's clarity. And as with everything that comes out of government at the moment, the devil will be in the detail, and but I want to make sure that we understand that the DMP is still as important as it was, because that's the bit that's going to be helpful. I think that's most of the points covered. Is there any other ones that members would like me to include? Nick?
So, yeah, because looking at the what is it, the attendees, and I noticed that there was a down at the bottom, follow-up actions you are responsible for. Are roles being assigned to the members standing? Because follow-up actions, I was wondering where that fitted in, and that might be worth something. You know, if members are going to, well, it's down on page, sorry, yes, page 103, 104, carries on. Sharing arrangements, expectations of past participants, post-meeting follow-up actions you are responsible for. And I think that might be worth something members to consider.
Thank you. Heather?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's quite a handy thing to have post meeting follow up, in as much as I'm envisaging this as having this gang of 4 or 5 people. They may well go off and do something, get information themselves and bring it back. As in, it's not draconian. You're not said, oh, you're on it, so you must do it. It's not that kind of thing. But you might decide, you know, you're going to go off and talk to your opposite number in somewhere else, and you come back and you share that, or whatever, or go and observe something, and you come back and tell your gang if that's what you've been doing. So I think, and if it were an officer who, you know, undertakes to do something, then they would come back. I think it's just trying to get that kind of commitment to being involved. But I don't think we wouldn't. Again, if you wanted to do that yourselves, that's up to you. But I wasn't envisaging them being on your head.
It's a valid point, but yeah, it's something to be clarified when we put out the expressions of interest. Okay, members, any other points or comments? I will circulate those recommendations formally, but if we're happy, any objection? No? Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for that. Thank you, Rowan. That was agenda item 7. Agenda item 8 is to note items circulated for information between meetings. The JTI Excel sheet was circulated. No points that come up from that. Agenda item 9, forward working plan then. Those of you will see that at the moment our March meeting is pretty full. I know there's a couple of other items that may come along. Jack, did you want to say anything in relation to it or comments? Yeah, okay, lost connection. So that's the wonder of being. So remember, so basically what we're saying, so the work programme, as you can see, we're starting to populate as we go through. Things are changing on a regular basis in relation to, we're waiting for the white paper to come out. We don't know the necessary implications for that. There are different decisions that are coming out at different times that we'll feed. As always, what I'm asking you to do, if you're happy to delegate responsibility down to the chair, vice chair and officers to work through our agenda for the meetings, then I would appreciate if you're happy to do that. Any points or comments? Jack.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I just wanted to inform the members that now you have a link to the forward plan, where forward plan is dynamic. It changes when we add items or proposed items with confirmation from the chair and the vice chair, if it's not right at the meeting. The item that we only added a couple of days ago was actually for April, which is an update from from Somerset Parent Carer Forum, as discussed between the chair and Ruth Hobbs. So apart from that, nothing else to add, Chair.
Just for clarity, members. So one of the things we hear lots about the Parent Carers Forum and the wonderful work that they do. We don't necessarily understand how it works, and I just thought it would be an ideal opportunity to understand that and to get a better understanding of that. The reason we've done that way. One of the things that we will have to start doing is when the officers meet with the senior leaders, they'll have to start prioritising some of these items because the list is starting to grow very quickly. However, things like that, so there may be a need to circulate some items for note between meetings because otherwise we'll be taking time in our meeting. The rationale behind the noting those is that it gives you all, if you think it needs to come to us, then just you can highlight it off of that and do it that way. Any other points or comments for our forward work programme? Thank you for your time, members. There we go. 4:56, meeting closed.